Got it. All right. It's 5:32, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'll ask that the attendance be recorded. Everyone on the board should have received agenda packets, so if you haven't yet had a chance to review them, please do so now, and then I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to Article 3, approval of the minutes of the May 16, 2023 meeting. Take a moment to look through those. If anyone has changes, please let us know. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes. Is second.
Discussion? Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving along. This is the point in the meeting where we acknowledge visitors and those wishing to speak to either agenda items or non-agenda items. I think that most of the people in the room have items on the agenda to speak to, but if there are visitors, now would be your time to come to the podium to share whatever thoughts you have. Do we have anyone on Zoom? Okay. All right, seeing no volunteers approaching the podium, let's move right on to Article 5 to discuss and consider requests from the Cascade Community Foundation. So I will invite Justin Swan up to the podium, and I need to disclose that I'm also on the board of the Cascade Community Foundation, so I'm going to abstain from the discussion and the vote on this item. There were also materials included in the packet.
We've already sponsored this.
Yeah, that's
so
okay.
just, this is secondary. This is ancillary in addition to, but while I'm here, I'm going to do my job and see what you all got. But well, I appreciate the time to come before the committee and board to talk about something that Cascade Community Foundation has been working on really relatively in short time. An idea was proposed to us to really grab hold of some efforts that we've been doing to support nonprofits and small businesses in the greater kind of Forest Hills community. And all of that kind of germinated from a board member and me sitting down to really go over where there might be opportunities to advocate on their behalf, but also to provide some education and professional development opportunities on their behalf. And over time, that has culminated into what we call Cascade Community Foundation's workshop series. And the whole purpose of this is to provide professional development in a peer-to-peer kind of structure. So I'll give you an example by way of our pilot project, which was just geared specifically towards small nonprofits. But we approached dozens and dozens of nonprofits and got about 15 of them to come together to talk about donor database management, which is, for anybody who's in nonprofits, understands how important it is to manage your donor database. For anybody who owns a business or is in sales, it's just like a CRM kind of platform. So how you would track your sales. And a lot of these individuals had one unique new donor database management system called Bloomerang. So we launched what was called Bloom School. And the whole idea was bring a bunch of people who are using this, or I should say underusing the same software system, and get them to work together to dive deeper into it, to extract out of it the true features that this donor software system provides. We did this over two separate days, on Wednesday, May 17th and Wednesday, May 24th. And like I said, all of it was peer-led. So these individuals got to determine what the topics that were most important to them are, specifically about the donor database software. And then we facilitated that meeting, convened the meeting, found sponsors for this workshop series, if you will. It was extremely successful. In your packet, you have kind of an outline and a letter. But in addition to that, on one of the last pages, you'll see both some testimonials of that specific pilot project. It says Bloom School is a success at the top. And then you're also seeing in that packet the next iteration of this, which is called DIY or Don't I. Same exact idea. Cascade Community Foundation is working with small businesses in this circumstances and small nonprofits to help them tackle video asset production. So any of you who own a business understand how important video can be now, whether it's on Instagram, on your website, just general promotion of your products and goods. But a lot of these businesses are working in their business, but they're not working on their business. And so this gives them a chance to come in for 2 days once again, day one is going to be the DIY portion of this. So all of us have a smartphone. Mine's sitting over there, but you can do pretty good video production on your smartphone. That's the DIY side. So we brought in an expert who's going to teach them how to do it. So when they walk away that day, they will literally have a video asset on their phone ready to go that they can use via social media or whatever. The following week, we have another expert coming in who's going to sit down and show business owners and some nonprofits how to go through an entire video production process with a prominent, premier videographer. So if they have budget for video marketing, they might go the second round with a more premier, process of that. If they don't, they're going to do a little bit of the DIY process. In my experience, you're going to end up with the same product, but we want to offer both of these. So I present this to all of you as something that I think would be great for a DDA to support, primarily because we're focused on small businesses. I've taken the time over the last month or so to go around and talk to several local small businesses, the Electric Bike Shop, Daylily Floral, among others, just to ask them, hey, we've done this pilot project. It's been pretty successful. Is this something you would be interested? And all of them who are like emphatically yes. They really are excited about the opportunity to get some professional development for themselves that are going to help with the operations of their business. And I think a lot of these individuals express a little bit of fear about getting too far outside of their skill set or comfort zone on their own. And that's where that peer-to-peer accountability comes in, where all of you could essentially be in a room to talk about how to do, in this case, video asset development. But you can lean on one another, to say, hey, Scott Vogel's done this probably a million times, but maybe Scott Preston hasn't. So you would be able to then lean on each other to just help build up that accountability. Last thing I'll mention in this is that it's our job as the community foundation to really help facilitate this. So we're really identifying experts across a number of topics, and then we'll be doing endless amounts of surveys with small businesses and small nonprofits to make sure that the content we are bringing forward is useful. We want it to be intentionally vital to their operations and not make it something where we're kind of forcing it upon them, but they're not going to walk away with anything of purpose. So there you go. Some budget items. I'd be happy to answer any questions about those. It should be fairly self-explanatory, but the DDA would not be the only partner in this. We are seeking several partners, including the state of Michigan, which things are looking pretty good in our early conversations with them about it. Some private grants, and then we will be making this a sponsorable type thing. So we'll be asking businesses here, for each one of these to sponsor these events as well. Yeah.
How much are you charging the small businesses for?
Nothing. Yeah, nothing. We want to make it free for them. I'm not necessarily always on board with that. I think there's something to be said about getting skin in the game that helps with accountability. But in the early going, the plan was we just want to start to get people in the door to just curry some interest in this and get some popularity around it. I could totally see there being kind of a membership portion of this in the future, but I don't want to walk too far down that path before we know really what we have there.
My concern is, it's free, I'll sign up, and then, I can't make it.
Yep, and then be a no-show.
If they had $50-$100 in the game, you're better off with attendance, is my opinion.
Yeah,
and it's not an outrageous fee.
Yeah, totally agree. Certainly something we will consider, and I don't mind just kind of leveraging a little guilt on those because we do buy lunch for this too. So we would be out of pocket on that. So that's a little bit of, leverage, like, hey, don't be a no-show. We had 0 no-shows at our pilot. So I was happy about that. I honestly was blown away by how popular it was walking away from it. So, but that's a great question. It certainly has been under consideration.
And how many of these seminars are we getting, you could say, for our contribution?
Yeah, we're looking at 4 to 6 per year. So not an overwhelming amount. But one thing that we noticed specifically from the pilot was this group that were all there created their own kind of subgroup, if you will. So they're already kind of communicating with us along with them outside of that. So now all these individuals are working together within that donor database and that software because now they have this cohort that they can lean on. So even though we're just going to be there 4 to 6 touch points per year, I think that I see these groups kind of being ongoing in them connecting and getting back to one another. which also I think would be really great for Cascade businesses, because I think when they start to work together on some things and start to realize there's some opportunities to maybe share in some costs on a video production, something like that, there'll be some opportunities, and then just general communication among them. But wonderful questions.
2 questions for you, Justin. One is, where are you conducting these classes? And secondly, so this next one, your first class was pretty much targeted towards nonprofits. This next one is pretty much open to every business that's out there. How would you plan on communicating to get that message to the multiple businesses that are within the district? And what is that district that you're looking to attack? Cover. Thank you.
We certainly want to hit as many small businesses in our coverage area as we possibly can. We work really well with the business association, so they've been kind enough to share with us their list. So we have a really well-refined list. We've also been around for 20 years. So our email list and follows and connectivity with small business isn't that bad either. We've done a pretty good job of vetting that list and keeping it clean. So we have the opportunity to really lean on the businesses that we talk to regularly. But truth be told, wearing out shoe leather is really kind of the best way to do this. And anybody who's in sales understands this. Like, you got to be willing to go door to door and, knock and hand them a flyer and ask them to be there, kind of thing. Once we pay to have it there, the expenses have been made outside of the cost of our lunches. But for the most part, I think we'll do a good job of reaching businesses. In terms of location, we ask people to come come forward with hosting it in a specific location. This certainly would be a good location right here. We want to use resources that are available to us, but we really like the idea of identifying other businesses where we can go. So in this last one, we happen to have it at Michigan Software Labs, kind of in that new Ada Village. This next one, we're moving it over to Junior Achievement, which is their new building off of East Paris. We certainly are going to be working with more firm Cascade businesses to host these things. We're meeting with Foley next week, actually, for one of them. So
The Sheridan, the big giant building that was kind of on a decline for a while, just had a huge multi-million-dollar reopening, and they are pretty proactive in hosting different things to get their name out there. I don't know, that'd be
great. Yeah.
I think they're reaching out to businesses Sundays as kind of a marketing thing. So I don't know. It's really nice on the inside.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Yeah. And usually we can get
the Sheridan for a while.
Oh, the Sheridan. Okay. Yeah.
Or Marriott. Yeah. The old Crown.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yep. We do a pretty good job of getting people to, even if it's paid space, they tend to give it to us, in kind and complimentary. And then I think we do a pretty good job of letting them realize the benefit of bringing businesses into a place that's trying to sell things to businesses, like conferences and meeting spaces. So we really do a good job of identifying good spots. I mean, I think anybody who's been to some of our events, would know that. So yeah, good question.
Have you identified all the topics going forward for these, or not yet, or you're in development with that?
Yeah, it'll be constantly in development. We've identified the next 2, which is going to be the video production. The next one is branding. So this one's really unique, and we just happened to stumble onto it at a business association luncheon where Bill McKendry, he's a really well-known consultant. He's over on the Lakeshore. They did the This Is Us Jesus ads during the Super Bowl. So he was speaking, and I, of course, after the meeting, went right up to him and asked him if he'd be willing to consider coming in to share. This one, we want it to be intended for business, but to help small businesses understand, I would say, kind of the generational changes in branding and what they need to keep up on. Because, I mean, as you guys know, like, if you wait 10 minutes with your eyes closed, the branding and marketing segments have changed, and now this is the new hot thing. And he is amazing at it. I mean, he did about a 20-minute presentation, and everybody in the room is blown away by what they've been doing wrong, essentially. So that's the next one, probably slated for the end of the year. But we haven't gone that much further because we really want to rely on the cohort that comes to help us identify future topics so that we're not just coming up with them.
So could we reach out as the DDA, like Township, to every business we have on our correspondence?
That would be great. You can CC me on that email too, so that I know who all of them are and can reach out to them myself. So that'd be wonderful. I think if this body wanted to use it as a kind of a partner that's going to drive it out there, I think that would be wonderful. The community foundation is really designed to be in the background. We've been a little bit more forward facing over the last few years, just so we can kind of implement programming and get some more people to know who we are. But our whole purpose really is to be in the background. So we're looking for a partner in this more than just a sponsor in this.
Have you given thought to the opportunities that the DDA, if they decided to do this, would have in co-branding events, like on assets and whatnot? I mean, we have a logo. Have you thought through how that would work or look?
Yeah, I think if you guys would do this, you would be a co-branded partner on everything that we do around this. Like, to me, it's built to be where we're one of, 3 or 4. So we're talking to the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, which makes no sense because it's the Health Endowment Fund, but they support stuff like this as well, about coming forward with some stuff. And then we're talking with a couple other foundations that I don't think would want their logo, top, above the marquee kind of thing. They wouldn't want that. They just like to give it and just kind of be in the background. So there's certainly room for us and others to be involved in that. I don't know what the state would want, but, frankly, like, this is, the locale right here. So we would certainly push this. And I think anybody who's partnered with us on that respect would know that, we tend to give more than what we say we're going to give and take less than what we, really probably could or should. Because it really is, it is about the partners that we're involved in, including the businesses that we'd be supporting.
So I hate to ask this, but on the bottom of the flyer for the DIY or Don't I?
Yeah.
There are 5 logos there. 3 of them I recognize. 2 of them I have no idea who they are.
The 2 that you don't know are the actual businesses that these 2 own. So we produced this flyer just as a draft, just as an example. I don't know Kelsey, who does this stuff. I don't think she started to promote this yet because we wanted to do a little bit of more hunting on some underwriters for that.
Right.
But that's ABA. Shutterworks is the second one, us in the middle. That's Junior Achievement, where the host is. And then that really funky one is Chelsea on the left in that circle picture. That's her company called Tact.
Gotcha.
Other questions?
So as I calculated, you're looking at approximately $6,000 to $8,000 cost for each seminar.
Yeah. I would have to go back through and do the math or look at the algorithm in the Excel sheet, but what we've put together is what we see as 2 years worth. So we were thinking like 6, so 2 more this year plus an additional 4 next year that we would host. So these broken down the numbers of like 6
So
events.
the 6 would be over 2 years.
2 years. Yep.
So then that I calculated it at 6 per year. So you're looking at then, 6 divided into 96.
Mhm.
That is 16,000 per seminar.
So yep.
That seems like a large expense for hosting a seminar.
Yeah, and as goes with these budgets, we've really have put in there anything that it possibly could be. And to me, those contractor expenses are going to be pretty large. Like, we want to bring in professionals who know what they're doing in this case. We're only going to be able to lean on those that will give it to us for free for so long before it's going to be an actual true full expense. And then as you can see on the second page of the personnel budget, you can see how time is allocated. So we've allocated somebody as a program director to do this kind of work that will, kind of be responsible for this as well. So yeah, it's unfortunately things are just expensive these days. It's just kind of the name of the game. But the nice thing about this is that it's an expenditure that several businesses and nonprofits get to then share in and benefit from. So even though it may look like a larger ticket price, in the long run, those really, it's really a small investment for a lot of businesses to be able to benefit from.
So where's the rest of your funding coming from?
Yeah, so we've identified the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, which we've requested it. We've met with them twice. They really like this, so we're hoping to be able to move that into the projected box on that first page. Certainly, you guys would be included in there. We have a private grantor that actually initially came forward to support our Q&A live stream series, which during COVID was really important to have like a video, live stream portion to this. They've agreed to delegate a portion of their funds. They're doing a 5-year gift to us towards this, just because they see it as more useful programming moving forward. And then obviously the sponsor side of that. And then we've sat down with a couple of private, just private families that seem to be really interested in this as well. And then we're also going to take this to the larger families too. So this is really the first time Cascade Community Foundation has had real true programming to bring forward. That's not historically our role, is really to be kind of a bridge, to divert dollars to what's needed. In this case, we're finally able to really go to foundations and say, hey, listen, we have a program that's going to impact small businesses, small nonprofits. Here's what it looks like. Would you support that? We've gotten no's across the board with anything we've really asked them in the past. So some of them are excited. The big one, Amway, is really excited about this. I talked to them about it today in more detail. So we're going to ask them for, probably around $7,500 type thing for that. Probably will come through as a little bit of a sponsorship as well. And then we just have some private families that just are interested in this kind of work.
So we could formally, like Cascade Township DDA could directly contact our local businesses and invite them to this, like,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
put it out on our.
Yep. I mean, that'd be a huge help for us too. I mean, we're going to do it as well, and we'll be a marketing engine for it for sure. But we totally expect our partners to be on board with it. Amway today in their discussion, they were asking me which of the nonprofits they support would be good to invite to some of the stuff that we're doing. So we were trying to weed out which ones would not be so good and which ones would be good so that they can get this invite out there as well.
Other questions?
I guess the only other question that I have from the board and whoever is the purse keeper, what we have, if there's anything within the budget that may be available.
So we haven't accounted for this in the budget.
Correct.
And then I think your secondary question is, do we have the money? I mean, budget amendments are something that happens all the time. I don't, the fact that it's not included in our budget is problematic. I don't know that I got a response from Brian, my question about what our fund balance is, but I think it's still, upwards of $1 million, isn't it? So we have the money, but you're correct that it's not currently in the budget.
Okay.
So it would be 18,000 per year, basically.
Per year, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I like it. It's the DDA's job is to help local businesses, and we could kind of hire you guys as the event planner. If it was something that the businesses need and want, could benefit from, I personally like it.
Yeah.
Scott, is that a hand or?
Oh, no, I like it.
Other discussion?
I like the idea. I think you should request a small token. That's my opinion, instead of it just being free.
Yeah.
Because I think people will be more committed to go.
Yeah. We'll certainly consider that probably for that Bill McKendry one, because I suspect there'll be a cost there too. So I think that would be wise for us to do that. And it's going to be highly coveted. So I could see that being the case.
Other discussion? Yes.
We're in a corner pocket, right? One question I do have is, in the unlikely event no companies from the DDA attend, are we still operating within appropriate parameters? Does that make sense? Because if we're funding something and no businesses from, which I think is unlikely, from the DDA, does that create a challenge for us that we would need to organize the sponsorship in some way that we get so many seats at the event?
I think that we certainly need to be clear that it's promoted to the DDA businesses and open to them. I don't know that we need to allocate. I mean, if space becomes an issue, then I think it's totally appropriate to ask that we have some sort of reservation for a certain number of DDA businesses, but I don't.
And it's
Yeah.
100% an appropriate use of DDA funds. So then if we didn't get any participants, then someone might question if we kept doing it.
Right. And
Yeah.
I assume that that's
But
information.
we should be questioning it if nobody did it. It's a great,
Yeah,
we gotta
yeah.
try.
And I think it's a great program. I just want to make sure within the parameters of how we operate and fund things that we're in compliance. That's the key question.
I think it'll be important to track those metrics so that we can, explain and justify why we've made the decision, but we're certainly offering it as an opportunity
Right.
to the DDA board, thus it fits within our scope of authority.
And we can do that ahead of time. This doesn't have to be a post, game report where, oh yeah, no DDA people were there, or, no Cascade businesses were there. Sorry, guys. It doesn't have to be that. We can be proactive ahead of this to make sure that they're seeing the value in it. Particularly if you guys are listed in there as a partner, I think that's going to have some juice. And to me, it's going to be great for that too, because people are going to be out there seeing your brand going, oh, okay, great. Yeah. Like okay, this is fantastic. We're starting to get some stuff here. So I think I'm not too worried about it just based on the conversations I've had, but at the same time, I definitely appreciate the concern.
Other questions? All right, as I said, I have to recuse myself from a vote because I'm also on the board of the foundation. So I'll defer to the rest of you to make a motion and support it.
I move that the Cascade DDA supports donating $18,000 for 2 years, $18,000 a year for 2 years to the Cascade Foundation for these business meetings.
I'll second it.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And let the record reflect that I've abstained. All right.
Lastly, please take a look at this. This is our upcoming event. A few of you are already very well aware of it. But this is our main thing that we do every year is this Tributes and Triumphs. It's an opportunity for Cascade Community Foundation to honor those among us who give back to community philanthropy. It's an awards, but as you can see with the promotional content, which will go unnamed, to protect us from any prices, whatever. It's going to be a fun time. We need a lot of gift cards. Everybody, we're going to have 4 of these classic game show things at the event, and we need to give away gift cards for each of those. It's a pay to play kind of system. So we want to be able to give away gifts. So if you are a business owner or no business owners that might donate some gift cards or want to sponsor this, it's going to be a top tier event. It's going to be like nothing you've ever been to. There's a lot of excitement around it. So please pass it along to your friends.
And for context, a different flavor of the same event was the event last year where Nothing Bundt Cakes and Scott and his wife were honored, among other honors.
It's a great event, even if you aren't nominated or honored. It's just a great event.
So good class of nominees this year too. So with that, thank you so much for the support. I greatly appreciate it. Much so. So I'll take my lead.
Thank you.
All right, assuming we have nothing more to discuss regarding the foundation, let's move on to Article 6, an update from our new Parks Director, Melanie Mannion. Should have gotten this.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you already. I have only been here just over a month, so it's kind of been a very exciting and busy month. And I really appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about my background, but also more importantly, what I hope is the future of Cascade Parks. And I apologize for displacing both of you. I'm so embarrassed and horrified, but my laptop did not have PowerPoint on it. It's a fault of being a new person. I had never used my laptop for a presentation before, so I apologize. So Maddie's going to help me. So
Everyone, if you hit the right button on your, underneath your keyboards, you can see the PowerPoint.
I love the fact that you are a tech person. Thank you. I did not know that. The main topic for tonight is to talk about Tassel Park and Memorial Park, Westdale Memorial Park. But let me first, before I get into that, explain where I come from. I have worked 13 of the past years at Ottawa County Parks. If you're familiar with Rosie Mound and Tunnel Park, those were the parks I was responsible for. So 43 parks in total, just under 7,500 acres. And I manage the natural resources of those parks and also the volunteer program. And I am just thrilled to come here because of the legacy that the parks, Cascade Township has with its 7 parks and its 17 miles of pathways. But the committee, the Parks Committee led by Jenny Wanty, has done outstanding things in the last 5 years. And hopefully you have all read the strategic plan, the 5-year strategic plan. And much of what I'm going to talk about today is incorporated into that plan and the vision that they had. But the first part of their vision was to hire this position. Again, this is the very first Parks Department position. And I think what I'm hoping that I'm worth the money because it's having a person that is a professional parks employee coming and looking at our current parks at the status that they are, and then really trying to help bring them into the next generation and into the future. So Tassel happened to be one of the parks that on my list of 49 things that Jenny gave me on my first day was actually pretty low, but the words that I heard was, the donor is not happy. And those are words that I don't like to hear at all. And so I immediately made it a top priority for me to go out and see what should be, in my opinion, the jewel of the Parks Department. It is literally the keystone. It's right there in the center of the downtown, well, not the center, but in the downtown area. And it's really important to represent the community at large. And I will tell you, quite frankly, I was kind of disappointed. So when I got there, and again, I come from Ottawa County, and if you know anything about Ottawa County, we're a little bit particular, so very, very high standards about quality. And I expected that in Cascade because everything here is such high standards and so beautiful. And I was really surprised and taken back at how weathered and aged the park looked. And I think just having a fresh set of eyes is helpful to look at this. But again, I know the donor was also very concerned at the current status of the condition of the park. So the most of my presentation will talk about the current status and what we've been doing, but then also the future and the hopes that I have for the park. So this is what I saw on that first visit. Again, aged buildings. I come from Toledo, Ohio, and this is exactly what most of Toledo looks like, just kind of aged and unkempt. The buildings themselves have not been cleaned in a while. The beds have a lot of dead plant material or dying material and a significant amount of just weeds and junk material. The benches are worn and the dock is not only not attractive, it hasn't been power washed or stained recently, but there's also tripping hazards on there. There's actually nails sticking up and boards. So I want to show you a few before and after pictures of this. So on your left, you'll see the before and after. Our hard employees working out there, you can see what it looks like today. You can notice, hopefully, not only the power washing has really given it a fresh look, but also, unfortunately, a lot of the beds are now empty. We filled them in with mulch. So they look cleaner, but they definitely look empty. Again, notice the dead and dying trees, and this is what that bed looks like today. You can see the guys hard at work. They did a great job. They were enthusiastic and very excited to take this on and complete it. And within one day, they did outstanding work. And it was a lot of power washing. But this is what, to me, is what I will never let happen again in our parks department as long as I am the leader. When someone commits dollars, they're investing not only their dollars, but also their family legacy into that property. And to me, that is the most important thing to honor. And so if your name is on a building, that building needs to be the best looking building in the neighborhood. And so this is really important for me going forward to let you know that this is something that I will watch and I will guard and make sure this doesn't happen again. Our guys did go out and they sanded down the benches. We're in the process of trying to find someone to paint them, but because it turns out those benches are so nice, because again, I never saw the park when it was first developed. They are a very specialized bench that takes specialized paint. So we couldn't just paint them. So I apologize if you go out there and they're still unpainted, but that's the reason why we're trying to track down the correct paint. Another before and after, even the garbage cans needed a facelift. But as you can see, when about 60% of the vegetation in those landscape beds have died, or dead or dying, we do have a lot of work to replant. So right now I'm working, I've ordered the plants. We are going to use native wildflowers that are very showy, but will also be great for pollinators and birds and other wildlife. So they are landscape plants, but they are native species. And I'm trying to find, I presented to the Rotary Club today, and we're trying to find volunteer groups to help us plant those. So if anyone knows any groups that would like to come and plant some wildflowers, I would love to have people adopt a bed, because all of the beds need to be replanted, not just one or two, all of them do. So what's next? So we've really been working hard over the course of the last 2 weeks on this. We had one dedicated day with all staff, and then our staff has been pretty much every day out there since then. But there's still a lot of work that's going to take a lot more effort, including the signage. We have these beautiful stones that have completely become engulfed with turf. So you can see we've killed the turf, but we now need to remove that. And I've been told by Ginny that there are also markers for the homes that used to be there that are underneath the turf. So we have to rediscover those and unbury them. But this is the exciting one. So coming from a parks department that was 100% focused on connecting people to water, whether it be the Grand River or Lake Michigan, that was our primary goal. I was more than a little shocked at the riverfront here. This is prime real estate. This is what we should have as our most essential part of this park, connecting people to the lifeblood of water. Everybody wants to be near water. And you can see ours is not very inviting. And so a primary dream of mine is to really connect people to this part. Right now, there is a complete disconnect. I don't think most people, in fact, most people I've talked to didn't even know that there is a place down by the river. They only go to the upper level. And to me, this is where the majority of people should be experiencing the park, is by the water. I have to admit, I have seen some kids exploring down there. Then they got yelled at by Jenny. But we need to make sure it's safe, it's clean, it's aesthetic, and it's engaging our community. And again, is the jewel of our community, not the eyesore. So this is one picture. I live in Robinson Township, if you know anything about that. That is the kind of dock I would have in Robinson Township. Dreams of having a fishing pier. Thornapple is wonderful for fishing. We see people out there fishing. Wouldn't it be great to have an actual fishing pier? A lot of what is there is a remnant of the old homes. It's dilapidated, it's falling apart. So trying to rebuild that, and then again, make some exciting park features that bring people in. Do I know what those park features are? No. But right now we have our engineering firm is going out and doing the preliminary surveys. And then I hope to put out an RFP to get some companies to come and be creative about what we could do with this very precious space. I did not have any pictures of Westdale Memorial because they're all of weeds. Sorry, I realized it when I went to go do the slideshow. I'm like, nothing is big, but Westdale is the Memorial Park is very similar. That is probably 50% covered in weeds, and the landscapes need to be refreshed. Most of the woody species, most of the shrubs need to be replaced. I did meet with Ginny and a member of the, I was going to say, she is a current member of the Historical Society, correct? To consider what to plant there. I personally would not do native plants there, but we're going to look at more historical plants. That would bring more of a historical feel to the property versus what we're going to put over at Tassel. But I do want to thank my crew. They did a phenomenal job. They are wonderful, hard workers, and it is not their fault for the condition the park was in. And they have wanted it as much as I do to have it look the way it is going to look in the future. Any questions?
So this may be preliminary since you're talking about getting an RFP out for folks to give a vision for the park, but, and actually I had taken my dog for a walk through there the other day and noticed it was very nice.
Thank you. You
Yeah,
noticed.
I did.
Great.
But I also did notice a lot of like growth or dead trees and dead branches. I'm assuming that part of this is going to be going through and just trying to, I don't want to say clear it, but
Oh, no.
thin it out a bit so that you can enjoy the river from maybe not having to get down there on the lower level, but just wondering what your vision looks like for that.
There is a balance because the river is a primary corridor for wildlife, especially birds during migration and other wildlife. So you don't want to have it perfectly landscaped. You do want to have some understory in there. But what is really important is you have those, what we call view sheds. These little pockets, these windows into the river, especially for people with disabilities. I would hope that our design allows people with disabilities to get down into the lower level. But even if you're not, right now we have benches. We have 2 benches that are completely overgrown. And you could sit on that bench and still not see the river. That is a target that is on our project list. We just haven't made it there yet. We're trying to work on the beds and in the infrastructure first. And then we did the first slide. If you noticed the beautiful tree, that tree is phenomenal. It is, again, just this landmark. And yet it was completely overgrown and it lost its shape and its identity through that. So we did clear that up and we will plant that with lower growing things. And we'll probably kind of try to do that a little bit along the whole walkway, is planting lower growing things or taller things. A lot of what's there are young trees that are going to probably get up above it soon anyway.
Thanks.
But no, I do not envision it completely cleared, but definitely having window view sheds.
Other questions?
I just have a quick comment. Thank you. It was very insightful to actually see that. And our small business is pretty close to that park. And I've always felt that that's a really prime piece of real estate.
Yes.
I think within a quarter mile in each direction, I would argue maybe more. I don't think there's a house less than $1 million there. It certainly doesn't look like a park that's nestled between $1 million houses.
Yes.
And so it's nice to see that. I guess it's lacking myself as a board member, but I never noticed it either, just because there's nothing to really, but I'm glad you brought that up. It looking at those pictures and then now remembering walking through it, you're like, yeah, I guess it wasn't in a shape that it should be in.
I didn't realize it either.
It did not represent the community. And it is one of those things, again, having fresh eyes, you can see it versus over time, it was incremental and you never noticed it because it was so incremental. But when you have things that is not cared for correctly, it does attract, it dissuades people who you want there and attracts people that you don't want there, if that makes sense. So we want to have it represent the community surrounding it, which is beautiful, stunning, top notch. And Jenny mentioned, and one of the other very important key pieces to this, again, this is a phased approach, but looking long term, is the old doctor's building that's there adjacent to it that we own, that again is on the river. And the idea is this summer we hope to take that down, but again, creating, if you look at all the large cities, what are they doing? You're creating river walkways, right? Every large city, because that's where people want to be. And we will have our own river walkway that will go along Tassel and then through where currently the doctor's building is.
Just one comment, one question. My kids got their graduation pictures taken there, I want to say 12 years ago from Forest Hill Central. It looked a little bit different back then, and it's nice to see that it's getting cleaned up a little bit. Just wondering, do you foresee people driving there to visit the park mostly or walking there? Or I guess part of our vision to see a lot more people walk there in the future? It is kind of hard to get there walking a little bit.
So that is a predicament. So currently when I'm there, there's usually between the two parking lots, there are spaces. But if we entice people more by having a wonderful kayak launch or a paddleboard area or a fishing pier, hammocking spots, we might attract more people. I hope to attract more people. So we will have to increase our parking, and there are some options with that. Again, long-term with the Tuffy property, perhaps. That is an ideal spot to add more parking and long into the future. But again, trying to make it more walkable, I think, is critical. When I was out there the other day, I met a grandma with their children or grandchildren, and they walked from the ice cream shop, and then they came to play and then they were trying to debate which was more fun, the ice cream shop or the water feature. And I was like, the water feature? No. The frog was clearly better than all of it. And then they went and played on the frog. So yes, I envision it to be more of a community resource that's more walkable to it. Maybe some of the local neighborhoods could eventually have access to it.
I think that's great. It fits in so well to the broad plan and the reimagining of everything. And I loved your comment about pictures, because my daughter who's at Forest Hill Center had her prom pictures taken with her friends in Tassel Park a month or so ago. And we turned out all right, but we noticed we had to do some creative positioning to.
Which is a shame, because again, one of my favorite things about Ottawa County Parks is how many people fight to have their photos at Ottawa County Parks. We actually had to have a permitting process because there were actual arguments and people were bringing furniture into the parks.
Wow.
Whole sofas for their pictures. So I hope that that's a problem for us someday. But we need to make it beautiful enough to want people to do that.
Yes.
I don't have a question. This is really more information sharing. This is really timely because we've had some conversations about Westdale Memorial Park in that it's evolved over time and evolved in ways that it's turned into something that I don't think was originally planned. And now the last evolution was that it became this memorial park. And so there's been these sort of phases, and how do we get it back to, now that it's a memorial park, how do we get it to a place where it looks and feels like a memorial park that's immediately adjacent to the historical society? So we talked about the sculptural benches that are in that park that aren't used very often, and there's a couple of other things that, expensive things that were put in there when it was one of the updates was made. And could those be relocated to the library project where they seemed like they might be more fitting, and then that memorial park could be redone so that it looks more. So when you say like historical plants going in there, that seems more fitting to. So that's just to let you know that we've had those conversations here and with Lulu and talking to them about, would they be able to use those things? And then what does that leave for, the.
Chris, are you okay if I address? I will say, and I do know about those plans, and I think it was a phenomenal idea to move those. I did raise some concerns, Jenny did as well, only for the fact that they are very expensive and very heavy. And I'm not sure if the cost of moving that was considered. And then in addition, we will need to it was designed with those in mind. And so we would need to create some retention walls because they are holding back a burn. And so we would have to completely remodel that park, which again, I'm open to it because I do appreciate and understand fully that they are beautiful and should be used in a place that's going to have a lot of people like Lulu's gathering spot. I value that. I just want to make sure that we've considered those details and the logistics in that process to make sure that because I do feel like, one, the chance of them getting damaged is probably pretty high, but more importantly, I think it might be really cost prohibitive. But I could be wrong because the designer thinks that he has a solution that maybe would not be cost prohibitive. So
Right.
I just say, I appreciate it. I'm open to it. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure
Yeah.
that our budget reflects it.
And that was basically, it was just, could this, be a possibility? And I mean, yeah, I certainly considered those things are behemoth and they do weigh a lot. I think that they can be moved without being damaged, but you're right, there is a cost involved in that. So how does that get absorbed into the overall?
What's the background? Does anyone, I heard those were from Spain and the wavy sculpture also, but that was before my time. Does anyone remember how much they cost?
Oh, I don't remember costs. No, goodness, numbers.
I heard they were expensive.
I mean, it was the general theme though of that garden was more kind of, in keeping with kind of, curvature and the river, and they had kind of the sound garden idea going. So this is all very vague recollection of the decisions made back then, but I don't remember.
No, that's okay. I just,
Were you on the meeting? Okay.
could be relative to how much it's
Yeah.
worth when they,
No,
where they're
but
appreciated.
you're certainly more of an expert. I mean, this is why I'm glad that you're, with the township now, because I don't know anything about designing a garden around any of the elements or any of those other issues that go into it. So we're happy to hear the recommendations that you have as this goes forward.
Well, and I need to stress the one thing that, I've had to express to the Parks Committee and all of the employees. I am a go-getter and I love this because I feel like there's so much enthusiasm behind our Parks Department here. And so I'm excited to jump right in, but feel free to please pull in the reins. And I am here to first and foremost learn. And so if there is something, I mean, clearly I'm a public servant. So if there is something that's a higher priority, I just need to hear that.
I don't think anybody's here is too shy.
I've learned that.
Will speak their minds.
While we have, and while we have you too, could we get, medians, anything green, the rock, I heard the update, but for the DDA that paid for it, the plaque.
Actually, I have two updates for that. One, Jim, our supervisor, it does have a solution. He has found someone that has a solution, and so we're just waiting. There was an issue because it's not flat, that there would be some water collected back there, and they were concerned that would not work. So he did find a solution to that. So hopefully that will be implemented soon because it is an eyesore. I have a picture of it. Anything that's an eyesore is on my phone. And then the medians, again, I have it already slated. I already have it purchased. What we're hoping to do is take the hostas and the things that are currently there and move them to tassel because they're more suited for tassel. They're more shade and that's just a better place for them. And then I have native wildflowers that are more aesthetic wildflowers, not weedy looking ones for the medians. Things like butterfly weed and rose, all very low growing, so they're 2 feet or less. But it'll also the one will have a flower that goes up a little bit, so it will create some winter structure, so people do not run them over. So it will have some winter structure. The goal is it'll be very formally designed, so it does not look like an unkempt, weedy space, but is also at the same time, they're drought tolerant, they're very hardy, and you don't need watering or fertilizer or any real upkeep outside of weeding.
Right. Thank you. Other questions, comments about parks? We really appreciate you coming. And
Yes.
giving this update. Thank you.
Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
Planters. Melanie, anything with planters? Sorry, as I'm forgetting.
Later on.
No, I know. I just wonder if there's specifics. I saw people watering them today. I just wondered.
Yep, they were in late today, our contract went late, but they went in too late in my opinion, but they were in.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
thanks.
Good catch. All right. Moving on to Article 7, updates regarding the library outdoor space project. Lulu? Glad to see you. Come on down. Justin's not here anymore for the Price is Right references. There you go. Hello. Les, welcome to you as well.
So it's going to be the West Show pretty soon. I'm just excited to be back. In terms of since I last was here, I've been meeting with the Parks Committee just to see about the process of our outdoor gathering space becoming an official park, getting a name to it so it also gets connected with the rest of the township. I also have a confirmation from KDL that next year we will have bikes available for residents too, when hopefully this outdoor gathering space will be ready. So any Cascade resident that has a KDL card or any KDL patron will be able to check out little KDL cruisers is what we call them. They're little bikes, they have little baskets on the front, so that helps to just keep everything connected. We'll start off with 2, and if they're really popular, I can get more of them. So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be so awesome. And then Wes has quite a few things to share with you related to the pavilion as well. We wanted to make sure that we got input from the DDA board on just how you're feeling about the direction. This is a step that we need to take in order to go back to the township board to get final approval and to start getting those bids so we can hopefully stay within our time frame. And with that, I'll turn it over to Wes, who knows a lot more about things than I do.
All right, well, good evening.
Might need to slide over and use the mic just so it gets recorded.
Okay, great. Yeah, good evening. Nice to see everybody again. So there's a couple things. I sent along an updated plan. Hopefully you all saw that. So tonight I just, we'll briefly review the updated landscape plan. It's pretty similar to what you have seen before, but I'll give you a couple updates related to that. Also, a couple things we're looking to get some feedback on tonight. Main thing is the pavilion. What people are leaning towards in terms of style, aesthetics and things of that nature, so that we can hone in on an exact design that we can get into the plan set for bidding purposes and engineering. And then also we touched on this a little bit already, the benches in Memorial Park and what we want to do with that, just one way or the other, if we can come to a decision on that, so that we can incorporate those into the design or not, because they're not something that can just sort of be plopped in due to how they are. They're kind of integral. So one way or the other. So just really quickly, the main change that you'll see on the landscape plan, and do you guys have that? Okay, great. It's interesting. So when we were using those gravity benches from Memorial Park, and they're a really cool feature. They create interesting space, but they're also you'll see on the plan, they kind of, instead of the landscaping or the benches that were originally on the lower and kind of outer area of that picnic lawn, they didn't make sense there because they're sitting kind of up into the slope. So we flip-flopped that and put those back worked into the slope, so they act as a kind of a retaining feature for people to sit against, and they define a landscape bed there behind one of the main walkways that arches around. And that actually took more time than it should have to get all those funny little benches to work out and work the right way and define the space properly. But I think it turned out pretty nice. One of the other modifications that you'll see is, instead of the fountain area and those gardens being pushed so far into the wooded area, those were pulled out a little bit, and for 2 reasons. One is, after we met with the conservation district and really reviewed those woods and saw how many invasive species are present in there, especially Oriental bittersweet and garlic mustard and a whole kind of host of other not so nice plants. That area is going to need to be worked on for several years to get that under control before we can do any meaningful planting in there. And so we wanted to keep the footprint of the new beds we're putting in there out of there as much as possible. So we pulled it out a little bit. Additionally, instead of that being a completely circular feature with beds going all the way around, it's a little bit more open to the path. So making it so people just kind of walking by casually can come and experience that fountain feature without going so far into that space. So people that are sitting around it for just kind of respite and relaxation aren't having a bunch of people wandering in and kind of doing the twirl and then walking back out, where there's going to be a little bit more active space on the lower end there. So I thought that worked out a little bit more nicely. So you'll see the pavilion feature on there too, kind of the same as what we had as where we had been showing it. It's just a little bit more dialed in terms of the potential design, but that's just a placeholder until we get more feedback from the DDA on that feature. So all in all, in keeping with the design that you've seen so far, with just some modifications as we drill down to the details a little bit and work on things like grading and landscaping, drainage, and incorporating the different features into the plan.
Question.
Yeah.
What are the pink circles?
Those are trees. Those are more of kind of small ornamental trees,
Okay.
possibly serviceberry, redbud, something like that to frame in that seating area there.
Hoping they weren't umbrellas.
Yeah, no umbrellas, not so far. So, a couple of things about the design too. The circular path goes all the way around. Then when it reaches the far corner where it seems like it stops, it ties into our woodland path. So people are going to be able to walk the whole thing and either turn around and come back through, or then meander in the woodland paths where we'll have some of those sound scape features in the wooded area, kind of where the kids can have at them and have fun, but they're sort of in kind of a buffered space, like a little woodland exploratory zone in there. And yeah, other than that, the design, for all intents and purposes, is in keeping with what you've seen in our last presentation. Yeah.
So I can't tell. So the pavilion, is it facing towards the wooded area, or is it facing towards, it looks like the sidewalk aspect
Yes.
of things?
Right now, the pavilion is facing out towards the sidewalk, and
So facing Cascade Road.
yes, and the reason for that.
Street.
Yes, and the reason for that is that it's going to be, we're pretty sure it's going to be open on all sides, so not have a wall on the back or anything like that. So that's going to help connectivity to the more highly used space to the east, south. But that it opens up to that large field, and focusing on the area that's most level, down to the side, they've got the drainage basin. So we're focusing on the main level part of the field, so that when this is used for larger events and things like that, it can be an area of staging and focal point, and then presenting out to a crowd of people. So that's the anchor space pointing out, but it also can easily function as just a covered space in that location for people to use. And I should mention also that we put a grass area off to the right side of it, because the large grass area of the field right now that desperately needs water, that area is going to be continually flexible space. So anybody can come and use that. But if this pavilion does get rented out, the area to the right, that grass area, that's going to function as a little bit of an extension of this space where people can set up lawn games or additional, tables and chairs or things of that nature. So it's going to be just additional flexible space. And when that area is not being used, it's another kind of nice cozy garden space for people to use for flexible activities. But yeah, it does kind of, at least with this version right now, and we'll get into that pavilion discussion, it faces out to that main field, so that it's kind of the people in the field or enjoying an event will have their, backs to the main road and focus back at the pavilion. So we had some questions about that before too. Yeah.
Now, with the pavilion facing the field there, does it go up at all, or is it going down, or what is the landscape or the topography, I should say, from that?
At that elevation, it's mostly flat. We are toying around with the idea of raising the pavilion up, the whole stage area, the footprint of it, just a few feet potentially, with ramps alongside to get up. However, even adding, ramps and stairs does prevent some accessibility issues potentially, but it will be basically flat looking out into that field, with the field then falling away slightly. So it'll be ever so slightly raised above the field at a minimum, maybe a couple feet up if we decide to raise the whole kind of, quote unquote stage area or gathering area.
Now, this may be a stupid question,
There are no
but
stupid
does the library have any plans for expansion
Of the state.
of the actual library? Because how many times have I seen, especially county, they come through and do one thing and 2 years later they're tearing it up and doing something else. And I'd hate that we spend all this money and 3-4 years down the road, the library expands, because it is my understanding the library is being used very heavily and you need more space.
We need more meeting room spaces. So we'll be addressing that with the interior refresh to get some unique furniture. We're also looking at how some of the rooms are currently used and if there's a way to kind of reconfigure the space we have. But honestly, I've been to some of our double-story branches. I personally don't love them. I think it reduces connection. What I love about the Cascade branch is when you walk in, there's someone right there to help you. And what I've experienced when I go to some of the branches that are 2-story, so whether it's Ada or Kentwood, you lose that connection and you
Sure.
have a giant library. Plus circulation, print circulation is going down. We're seeing ebooks go up significantly and people want to just come into the space. At least that's the way Cascade residents are
Okay.
currently.
Just asking a question on that.
I think the only question I have along the same lines of where you're at is just kind of forward looking as if you're going to do additional programming and doing a number of things that we don't currently do at this site, there will be a need for storage. And sometimes storage becomes an afterthought, meaning like, oh gosh, with bikes, for tables, for everything else, then we have this beautiful park and then this shed just shows up as an afterthought. And I just want to make sure as we are looking at increasing programming and all these different options that we have the ability to flexibly store said items and it integrates well with what we're doing.
Yeah, so at least from my perspective, what the expansion of programming looks like is swapping some of the programs we currently do to make sure that we include an outdoor element. So we offer story times. Currently during the summer, we do 2 a week, and then we have some presenter programs. Today we had a juggler, a competitive, international competitive juggler, boy Nick. And Friday we had alligator sanctuary. So for me, it looks like taking some of those programs outdoors. So instead of a story time next year, we plan to do nature tots, which is basically you do a story time, but also then you take your 0 to 5s, you take them outside, they get to explore, discover, play with nature. You can do fun little crafts with them, like you take cardboard, you make a lion face, and then you let them poke little flowers through it, and they get to take home a dandelion. They get to put dandelions in it. We do a library camp currently. We offer it 2 times a week on Mondays and Wednesdays. It looks like one of those being converted to an outdoor adventure camp. We've been doing a bit of research on what other places are doing, other parks throughout the US, and that's been pretty popular. That would probably be a grade school program. And it just looks like a weekly rotation, doing fun little things to get people outdoors, get them exploring, and get them connected to nature. There are probably a couple of things that we already are doing seasonally, but every season, my branch has the most programming. So we offer, I think this summer we have about 120 programs that residents can come to. We can't really absorb too much more because my staff won't grow. So we typically offer 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and then usually some form of a rotation in the evening for programs for adults. We just want to make sure that the programs that we are offering and encourages people to go outside.
Wes, did the sidewalk throughout there, number 9, did the material change? I see it's listed as decomposed granite trails.
Yes, in a couple locations. So we were going to have those decomposed granite trails through the wooded area anyway, just as kind of a softer, more flexible material because we just didn't need all that concrete. Also, where the new benches from Memorial Park are located. I mean, potentially if we kept those, it's a little bit more of a flexible surface and larger areas of it. It was just killing me to do all that with concrete. It's also a lot more cost effective and it's ADA compliant and all those things. So in a couple of locations, more auxiliary or kind of adjacent locations, we're doing some of those softer hardscapes to save on cost, but also to help kind of just soften the space overall and not just have too much concrete out there. And those wouldn't need to be snow plowed and things like that. Those would be, all the main corridors and the main use areas would all be able to be plowed in the wintertime. But those areas, when there's too much snow to use the space, those areas would just be kind of covered in a nice blanket until they can be used.
Well, that was going to be my question.
Yes.
I wasn't sure with this new material if the snow plows would be able to go through it without ripping it to shreds.
Yeah, those areas would not be planned to be plowed. Yep.
Okay.
One question I have on the design, depending upon the pavilion that we pick, the grass area that is between the pavilion and the woods, I see you have a small entrance to it, but if it's an open pavilion where they can walk, especially if we have a lot of children's programs out there, my concern is a lot of the plantings are going to be trampled to get to the grass area.
Yeah, and there could be more connections going into the woods. We could eliminate the one on that side completely. It's also to help just define space a little bit as well. If people were using that space that weren't associated with what's going on in pavilion.
I was referring from the pavilion to the grass space. You have a botanical garden or perennial garden planting? Yeah, perennial garden spaces.
Yeah.
Between the pavilion and the grass space.
Right.
And, just a suggestion is, should there be more of a walkway from the pavilion to that grass space instead of having to go around? A lot of it depends upon what type of pavilion that we
Sure.
decide.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a good point. And it will, I went to Michigan State and I did some design planning there, and you watch where the students go, and then you put a path in there. So that's what I like to think about a lot. Like, okay, is somebody going to want to walk right through here? And if so, and if it makes sense, then, we'll make sure we either keep that open or, not put a bed right there. But you don't fight where people want to go naturally. It's a losing battle. Your point is well taken for sure.
Have you had, the benches, moving them, the ones that are in Westdale Park?
Yeah.
Have you, crunched it out, if it's possible, if it's doable, if it's cost prohibitive?
So I spoke with one of the contractors who's from Harder and Warner, who's been giving us some feedback, quotes and things like that. I talked to him today, and he said, yeah, those look heavy. We can do it. So originally, and I think that Melanie and Ginny bringing this question up is really beneficial, because I think originally we're like, oh yeah, we'll just take the benches from over there. And I think originally, like, someone from the township will do it. I didn't give too terribly much thought. I said, great, that sounds great. They'll just be here one day.
That was my fault.
Yeah. So that's a good point. But they did say that they could definitely be moved. It didn't give me a price quote to do it, but I mean, if they're here doing this, pretty substantial project, I told them it was a mile down the road or something like that. It's not going to be any enormous thing. It wouldn't be, free. But I don't know from a cost point what it would be. The big thing that they said is they'd probably, wrap them to protect them. Have to get the forklifts under them. They don't know how heavy they are. So if they can't, if it's going to be too difficult to sort of pry them up and get the forks under them, then you'll probably almost certainly have damage to the concrete below. So, you got to know that if we are going to, and I mean, let's have this bench conversation right now, if we can, just to get kind of a direction one way or the other, because they should be, the park should have some sort of an idea of what's going to happen if they do get yanked out. In terms of a design, or what's going to happen when they are removed. Also knowing that there is going to be likely some damage to the concrete right below where they're sitting if they're getting hoisted up. They said that they don't anticipate it being an issue. Said they would not guarantee that nothing would happen to any of those benches. They can't do that. I mean, let's say one of them right now has a hairline fracture, then you pick it up and okay, then it goes like that. Those are some things you just don't know. But number one, it's doable. The big thing we wanted to find out is, because the DDA were some of the main ones who said, hey, let's use those benches because we're going to do something different there. So if that's a plan, I think this is a great home for them. If that's up in the air and might not happen, then we certainly shouldn't plan for it. Because as you can see, they're an integral component. You can't, really just say, oh, well, we do have them, 2 weeks before the benches go in and then we throw them in. So I'd love to plan for them. But either way is completely fine with us. This park will be, great with or without them. In terms of the cost to move them, I think we're definitely saving money when it comes to the amount of benches that we would save in terms of what they're replacing. But again, it comes down to the fact of, are they, eventually going to be removed or not? And if we don't know that, then probably seems like, we shouldn't move them. But if we need a design for that space, you can know where to find a designer who's willing to do that. So.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, I'm kind of inclined to defer to the parks director's judgment on this, because he, is going to be working in that space in Memorial Garden. And I also thought, no big deal. So if we're creating a problem that doesn't need to be created.
Because they have to backfill it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why I said it's really timely if everybody is here at the same time.
Right, very true. So unless someone on the DDA board feels very strongly that we need to make this happen and move the benches, I'm inclined to say plan for an alternative.
Sure.
bench.
Yep.
I like, okay, so yes, because I was like, yeah, just move them over.
Same.
Typical Cascade cupcake response. But having said that, if they are like 150,000 plus shipped over from Spain and they're not seeing a lot of activity, well, they just don't. They don't see a lot of activity over there, and they are pretty unique. I'm not the one lifting it. That'd be harder. But if it's possible, given that they are such a statement piece and they were so expensive, I would be up for it. Having said that, I know it creates more work. So
I'm concerned they're going to be damaged.
Oh, I'm more concerned that Memorial Garden is going to be damaged. Like if there's going to be problems to the foundation, I don't
Yeah,
want
need
to
them out.
trash
Right.
that garden space by digging, bringing in the backhoe
Right.
and digging them up.
So,
we can't get knockoffs, can we? Since we have the original really expensive ones from Spain, now that we got the designs.
Yes.
Well, we paid for
But
the
I
first.
feel.
Yes. How about similar benches?
Custom?
Yeah.
Steve?
I was gonna say, I think, yeah, part of that discussion was as we were talking about the Memorial Park, it's again, we saw these benches as being a more of a modern style, and if the Memorial Park, let's bring back some old looking benches and from the way that we're talking, from the potential cost of just moving benches from one spot to the next. And yeah, I don't see a good reason personally.
Comments?
Certainly.
I spent some time with Joanne King, who's been with the Historical Society since the beginning. And this is the fourth time, or the fifth time, that Memorial Park would be changed. And she really, and I think there are other historical members that feel you all kind of keep making changes without talking to them. And they were told the last big change that there was an open checkbook, so they didn't need to be involved at all. And then they ended up spending the night digging out plants before they got picked up with a front loader and thrown away.
What about, is that with all the bricks? Remember those?
Oh, and then the brick went away. And I had no idea the history because I was not here at that time, but I do think just maybe you just sometime want to check with some of the historical members to just, I don't want hurt feelings.
It's a very
It's a-
well.
Yeah.
Were they hurt again? That brings me back to, I think we need to defer to the Parks Director because she's going to be the person in contact with them and she's got the
Agreed.
context.
yeah, great.
Make
You defer to
decisions.
them, and then also you don't want to hold up this park over a decision
Yeah.
over benches, right?
Yeah.
So, because if you break them, then you got to find another bench that fits there, and it may not be.
Move on from the benches.
Yep. Sounds good. Noted.
All right, let's talk about pavilions.
Yes. So, sent some pavilion examples for you to consider. I mean, there's a lot of different pavilion options out there. And as we mentioned during the, last presentation, some of our contractors have mentioned that we could have a design for pavilion that we're moving forward with, and they also could potentially, bid that as a custom job as well. So maybe it's a little bit different, more, and maybe it, in keeping with the design that we've selected, but, custom and potentially cost savings, or at least locally sourced materials and all that fun stuff. So the first pavilion that you'll see, number one, is kind of the design that you see reflected on the plan here. It is the design that we use to kind of price out the original pavilion estimates. It's had good feedback, and from everybody who's reviewed it so far. I think the one potential drawback is that there are others in other local municipalities that are similar to this one, such as the one in Ada. I know there's one in Rockford as well, but I think that they work nicely, so that could be why as well. But in discussions with some of the project stakeholders, I think that if we did go with that design, we would talk to the manufacturer and the architect and see what we could do to make this one more individual and custom and fitting of this project, something special and unique versus kind of plucked out of a catalog type of thing. So then the next options, I think 2 and 3, are different concepts that were brought forward. These are more of gazebo type features. So the difference between number one and these options is these are very aesthetically pleasing, really nice anchor point, good for group gatherings, but maybe not as much in terms of the dual functionality of being a kind of small event space, because you lose a little bit of the ability to connect with that adjacent field, large groups and things of that nature. And then moving on, I mean, 4, 5, and I think 6, 7, they're all just different takes on kind of the first concept, which is a larger pavilion band shell type of thing. I know that pavilion is what we're working with, where one side is a little bit more narrow, the other side is more open, indicating the direction or the focal direction to where we're going to be connecting with the folks attending an event. Or as you can see, they work perfectly well for small groups gathering, even in individuals with tables and chairs underneath there, can work for renting out and reserving special events, or even, obviously just passively for people wanting a covered space, whether that's, really sunny times or inclement weather and things of that nature. So as you can see, there's a lot of different designs. And so we know that, with the DDA graciously funding a lot of this project, we want to make sure that you have input on this, and it at least in terms of the style and materials and anything that you can comment to, so that we can, move forward and make a decision and start, putting the design plans forward into the next steps.
So is it an accurate thing to say that it's your recommendation that we go with something similar to one as opposed to the gazebo style for the reasons that you articulated?
It would be my recommendation, sure. However, if I just think the gazebos don't function as well for the connection during the event type of functionality of the space.
Style wise, they don't seem to fit with this building to me.
I love a gazebo, but
I
you're
do
right.
too.
It would look like it was just plunked out there.
It was a very separate, disconnected sort of style that doesn't, and I think of, the landscape plan that you put together, which to me feels really organic, and so 1 and 4 and these sort of simpler structures that are less fancy.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, so I like that a lot, but I still can't get over, I Googled it, Van Andel Family Pavilion opens in Ada, and it's like the same thing, except theirs is a little bit nicer because it's got a little elevated roof. Like, I just don't see how, even though I really, really like it, we could do something, unique and great in Cascade and literally it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, we need to, as he said, kind of bling it up to make it our own. I wonder whether the style could be modified so that it was in keeping with the style of the library or something.
Yeah,
like
but
that.
this isn't the style of the library.
No, I know. But I think the concept of having that pavilion as opposed to a gazebo is where we're leaning, and the thought of how is it architecturally designed? It would certainly be more expensive to do that, but it might be worth exploring.
Yeah, definitely.
So that it is something individual. With, what you're seeing here in one is, kind of out of the box, right?
Exactly. And so there's pros and cons to that. Number one, for the first design, one of the benefits, which is probably why you do see it in places like Ada and Rockford, is that it is a company who sells that specifically. They'll scale it up and down to your space. They'll do the engineering and specs and the whole thing, and they'll plunk it right in your design package, and then you're off to the races. Something else that's a little bit more custom, we'd have to, talk to an architect and a structural engineer and all those fun things, which we certainly can do. And I think, if that's the direction that we want to go, if everybody said, hey, number one's great, let's move forward with that. Okay, well, then that's easy. But if we want to say, let's get something a little bit more, like you said, reflective of the architecture of this building, something that's got some more details to it, maybe like with some of the other designs that are shown, something that you're not going to drive to the next community and see a reflection of that, then I think that's worth pursuing and something that we can do. And so that's some of the feedback that, we're looking for. And basically we can say, hey, to architect, said architect, or builder. We really like this concept, but we don't want to buy it out of a catalog. We want you to do something like this that's that's spruced up, that reflects this space a little better and is a custom, kind of reflection of what we're doing here, and go forward with that. And
I think that's our direction. I mean,
Yeah.
we're gonna have this beautiful new firehouse.
Yeah.
We're gonna have, we certainly want something that is reflective of the new things that we're doing. So we'll want it in keeping with, the style of the strategic plan that we talked about before, which all comes back to, we need an architect. I mean, we're not gonna be able to sit here as a DDA board, give you specs on how to bling this up, but find an expert who can give us
Yep.
an opinion on what we might do to make it a special thing for our community.
Yep.
Yes.
With number 4, it would solve Scott's comment where you have storage space right there, which I think is a very practical
It's a
comment. Very good point. And also, with the posts, we could do brick or something that would complement
yep.
the building here so that it draws the two of them together.
4 and 5 are similar and kind of nice. You could melt those.
Yeah.
4 has the wave like at the airport.
Yep.
Well, then let's just
Well,
separate
Or
ourselves.
the river.
Or the, right, no,
I
I
mean,
mean, that's why it's there is,
yeah, again, I don't think
But,
that we
yeah.
can get this designed by committee here.
no.
But I think in the direction of 4 with a storage space may not be a bad idea.
I like how 5 is more quaint in size.
Appreciate it.
So just looking at some of these, I think, first I was leaning towards maybe an elevated model, but I think looking at some of these, like especially number 4, I like that it's in sync with the field. I think it offers more flexibility. Like if someone was going to rent it out for a ceremony or whatever, and they had tables that kind of sprawled, it doesn't limit you to confine yourself to just a stage area, and you can spread out a little bit. So I think I like that it's even. I think it gives them more versatility.
Less liability to trips and falls and things like that.
Yeah, and that's where I was gonna go with, again, the design of 4, because of the storage shed. I'd put the door on the back side though, rather than the front side.
Totally agree.
Potentially make that go all the way up to the roof, because as I was sitting here thinking, it's like, gosh, in the evening or after it turns dark, could you almost, I don't know, could you show a movie out there? Have a projector.
Not a bad idea.
Rafter to be able to, again, gather people.
And Culver's could bring in custard. How's that?
Everyone.
Yeah, that's feedback I think we got from friends of the library too about doing movies and things like that. So.
Which we would love to do at some point for the.
I think that's a great idea.
To just like be in the outdoor space to see physically where things are gonna go, but it did come up from a friend too that they wanted to show a movie.
We'll still give you credit for that idea.
Oh, that's what I'm looking
Even though
for.
someone.
I'm talking about free custard though.
So do you feel that you have, is there a dissenting point on the board here? It seems like we've all kind of landed in the same direction.
Did we mention the brick? So the brick in number 5, but whatever we have out here, more than those, what do you call those, cement blocks on number 4?
Yeah.
And then 6 and 7 are just too big and too ball fieldish, like for this little library space.
I think the roof line definitely has to marry the library roof line too.
I can't think of what the library roof lines is.
This is
though.
the hip roof on number 4.
But that's just a portion of it. So,
Yeah.
but it's got the rounded and then the peak. I think both can be.
And I think
Again,
to your point, Wes, I apologize. To your point of the liability aspect of things, as I'm looking at things like 5, 6, maybe not 7, but looking at these designs, I can see kids climbing on these things where, number 4, there's posts. There's
good luck.
no way that,
Right.
it's there and they can't.
Practical.
Yeah.
Functional.
Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Safe, reduce liability.
Yeah.
We love that.
I think the only thing I would tack on is the materials that we choose, we have a maintenance plan.
Sure.
We've seen what happens. You can pick something that looks beautiful today, but it's really challenging to keep up, and especially with the extreme temperatures we have.
Fair point.
And so with that said, and I know you were talking about utilities at one point in time. So You may need power out there.
Yeah.
You'd need potentially water out there if you have to power wash the concrete or the equipment or whatever the case may be.
Sure, yep.
So we want a drinking fountain?
A drinking fountain would be outstanding
We're not doing bathrooms.
for the pets too.
Bathrooms will be inside the library.
But just so we think it all the way through.
Yeah, drinking fountains came up before as well, fill up your water bottle, those kind of newer ones, or even then have the pet pedal or whatever you call that, but yeah.
Great.
So does this go, what's next? This goes DDA, we're in a consensus, what, board of trustees, or what would be?
So it sounds like what I heard was, yes, you gave us some ideas of what direction you want to move forward. So it sounds like we need to get some designs as well. And that you guys want to hear in the future of what the final design is, but it sounds like you're good along those themes. For us, the next thing we have to do is to go back to the township board, from what I remember, and present them with the final design. And then we need to go forward with the bidding process because things continue to get more expensive the longer that we wait. So the sooner we can figure out who's going to do the work, who's going to create the pavilion, then we'll be able to come back again to the DDA once we have a design and to say, you like this. This is the direction we're going to move in.
What is the Friends of the Library looking for as far as with the pavilion?
Honestly, they just want it done.
I talked, so, wait, but I did run into one woman, like, that had, she said, no, what, I'm gonna mess up the words. For sure, she was like, no amphitheater, and that was, and then originally it was like a circle. I like this, I'm fine with it, I'm just saying, like, they did have opinions. I bumped into her at D&W. I don't know her.
When I went to the board meeting, they liked the design. They felt some of them still were functioning with outdated information, so they thought there was still an amphitheater or bathrooms or, so we've been doing, I've been doing quite a few tours with all of them too, to just kind of catch them up to speed because I'm learning some of the information wasn't filtered down from the top. But I think they're on board with it. The biggest thing that they're looking for me is just to communicate and tell them. And I really just want it to be a flexible space. It's not called a library park or whatever for a reason. I want it to be a community hub. I know there will be other people that want to come. And my goal is just to make sure that this space is the destination. So if somebody wants to come and have a graduation party and they're doing it out in the lawn, great if that follows the township rules. If somebody's coming there to take their wedding photos, that would be such a big thing to see someone come into our space, taking photos and to be excited to be in the park space. So as long as the pavilion or band shell is a flexible space, I'm happy with whatever we think on.
Just
And
be sure to check that box of checking with the Friends of the Library. to make sure
who came to the meeting?
Yeah.
Well, he's the president.
Okay, Joe, they were at the meeting when we did the walkthrough, and he was all thumbs up. He really liked the first pavilion design, which we showed today. So I think in terms of running with that as the framework and marrying that with the architecture of this building and doing a custom pavilion, I think would be right in line with.
Wait, the top one or 4?
Well,
the style, I guess. Yeah.
The simplicity and the,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I guess components of 1, 4, and 5 all sort of blended together.
Yeah.
So.
And needing water, because I can see having to hose it down. People will make a mess out there and then you're gonna need to hose it down, especially if they spilled the custard from.
Right. And storage shed.
It would, so. The built-in storage shed.
The Friends also, just so you guys all know, they understand that their commitment to the project only went so far. So in their viewpoint, they know we're coming to the DDA because that's where the majority of the funding came from. They're just excited that it all can be done at once. So they've been really excited when I did my last walkthrough. They have a board meeting every month. So I met with them on last week on Monday, and they didn't realize what they thought the project was just like a small little space right outside of the library. But when they got to walk the land, and a lot of them hadn't actually walked the full space, they realized how beautiful it's going to be. And then they were like, oh, what about the seats in the back? And I said, don't worry, Wes already is taking care of that. There's no seating around the library. They'll be connected. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you, because the feedback tonight really helps us kind of move forward and on a couple of key components. So we'll keep going now, finalizing a lot of the site work. There are kind of two things then, the overall site plan and then the pavilion. So I'll get going on finding some builders and architects to get, kind of bids and quotes on to do that work for us. And in terms of timeline, we'll just kind of keep moving forward steadily, making sure we keep everybody in the loop and in the fold in terms of when decisions are being made. We're like, Lulu has said a lot, we're targeting this fall, but I mean, we're halfway through the summer. And I think that, this fall, spring 2024, both those are really on the table. I think my primary goal is making sure this all gets done really, really well. And we don't leave any of those thoughts left out there, like, drinking fountains, we talked about that before, but, saying, okay, well, let's make sure that's in there. A storage space on the back of the pavilion, that was not going to be included up to this point. So like these discussions are helpful to make sure that these details are covered thoroughly. So that's kind of where we're standing at from a, project timelines.
Great. Just let us know when you'd like to be on future agendas for updates. I won't necessarily assume that you want to be here every month, but I'm happy to put you on the agenda every month, but we love to see both of you. So,
Yep.
you're certainly welcome to come by, but certainly if you have updates, let us know so we can budget the time for you.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Sure.
Is there anyone should we just be giving updates on the pavilion to everyone, or should we default to one member of the DDA board to kind of
Disseminate.
Yeah.
So usually it would be the DDA director, and that person hasn't yet been hired. So either sending it to me or sending it to Grace, we will make sure that it's included in the agenda packet because we've been collaborating on that. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other discussion? All right, moving on to Article 8. Eric is here to give us some updates regarding the feedback he's received from the road commission. Always exciting,
All right.
but it looks like it was a productive conversation.
I am here to excitedly talk about the infamous Cascade Road. Unfortunately, not as exciting as picking out gazebos or pavilions. So I do apologize.
But very important.
So what I included in your packet is a memo that's basically the culmination of several discussions on and off with the road commission so far in my kind of limited time so far with the township. So I won't bore you with reading through the memo today, but I'll highlight some parts of it. And if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. And more importantly, if there are things or ideas, concepts we want to explore going forward, I'm more than happy to flesh those out myself, to bring in our own engineering consultant that we have into the fold for their opinions. And I'm happy to go back to the road commission to talk to them with ideas that we have, concerns. They're very receptive. As I'm sure you know, but they're also kind of guarded about changes that we can make. So they're willing to listen, not necessarily willing to change. But I do believe we have a good positive relationship with them. And I'm happy to reach out and to talk to them about anything we have. So my understanding is that obviously with the village area, and that's kind of the focus of my talk here in the memo, is that the concern is pretty much speed, Cascade Road, non-motorized accessibility, as well as pedestrian and I guess vehicular safety at the same time. So the speed, it's a tricky situation. I think that the normal person wants to just say you lower the speed limit and the cars will go slower. Unfortunately, one, it's not the reality, and two, it's not how the road commission sets their speed limits, right? So it's based on 85th percentile speed, which is more or less what it is marked out there. If you did a speed study, you might find out cars go faster, and the road commission would say, hey, we got to raise the speed limit, which sounds counterintuitive, but it tends to be the way it is. So in terms of reducing the speed on a road like Cascade Road, you have to think about doing it through design. You have to make the driver go slower. Ways you can do that, pretty much, especially for trying to make the village kind of this downtown feeling area, is to increase the closeness of everything, if that makes sense. So you're thinking trees, tree canopy, landscaping, shrubs, sidewalks, maybe shorter building setbacks, street lights, center lane medians. There's one out there now with a pedestrian refuge, narrower lanes, things that make the driver have to kind of pay attention more, want to go slower because they're kind of uncomfortable. You want to make the driver uncomfortable. But you have to lower speed. The only way you're really going to do it is by these kind of, you're tricking the driver to do it with these design features. Safety, when I look at safety out there, especially from a pedestrian standpoint, I think about reducing the number of driveways that there are. And this is something I not specifically have asked the county about, but typically anyone who owns a road is more than happy to reduce the number of driveways on that road. But when I think about like a Meyer, for example, typically if you have a large commercial development like a Meyer, you'll have these small little businesses all around it, and they're all kind of contained in the same footprint. Like there's only one driveway from 28th Street into Meyer. So if you're going to Chick-fil-A, you're driving through Meyer to get to it. Now, if you look at the northeast side of the village area, the kind of, I call it the retail center with the Folding Warehouse and a bunch of other businesses, there's really essentially there's 5 driveways into that area there. If you look at Harvest Foods, you look at United Bank, the one off 28th Street, the gas station. Anyway, I think what you could do from our standpoint is you could take away a couple of those driveways. You focus left turning traffic at a couple of spots, like 28th Street, for example, would make a lot of sense. And that way you have fewer cars using your center turn lane. You can arguably turn a center turn lane more into a median. You can extend the existing median. You can add a pedestrian refuge. It gives you a little more options, design options to do something with. And like I said, ultimately it reduces the number of vehicles turning, it reduces the number of locations. So you have fewer conflict points with pedestrians, with bicycles, with cars. So that was my big thing with safety, would be to do that. Because at the same time, like I said, you might build narrow lanes that way. You might be able to add your median. So it's kind of a twofold. If you reduce these turning movements, you might be able to do these other things that might reduce speeds. The other thing is roundabouts. I think going back to the 2014 Complete Streets Plan, it talks about roundabouts. I hear about roundabouts all the time. I'm asked about roundabouts. And I'm not against roundabouts. I do like roundabouts in appropriate applications. And I do think they could, I mean, arguably you can make them work anywhere, right? You can make a lot of things work in a lot of places. My fear with using roundabouts, say at 28th Street or at Thornapple River, is that you're going to have to design them to carry the same capacity of traffic you do now, right? So it's a truck route, gets 15 to 19,000 vehicles a day. The road commission is going to make you make a 2-lane roundabout. It's going to have to be like a 200-foot diameter to get trucks through it. And what's going to happen is you're taking down or you're moving buildings, parking lots, signs, street lights, sidewalks, and you're clearing a big area to do this. And you're not really, and what's going to happen is you're either going to put stop control in those. You're going to put stop signs up because all your pedestrians are going to say it's not safe now. Cars don't stop. They do circles and they pay attention to other cars because that's what happens in a roundabout. So if you put stop control in there, you make it safe for pedestrians. But what you do is you essentially just make it a signalized intersection again. And if you don't do that again, you're not making it safe for your pedestrians. And at the same time, you're leveling large areas. You're defeating the purpose of this close downtown area feeling. So I would highly recommend against roundabouts. You know, I like novelty. I'm more than happy to try different things, and it would be fun to see it, right? But I just, from a responsibility standpoint, it's hard to say that's the answer. And that's just my take on that. Connections, the other thing I look at downtown, connectivity, Thornapple River Drive is a big one for me. And just to piggyback on Melanie's talk with Castle Park, it would be really nice to get a pathway down Thornapple River Drive. It's not for lack of effort of trying. It looks like we've in the past gone after doing that. Can't do it without getting easements in the right of way or outside the right of way. And property owners haven't been too forthcoming with giving those easements. Not that I blame them, because especially on the south side of the road, there's not a lot of room to give. So alternatively, you could go out there and you could say, we're going to try to make this a one-way road, and we're going to put, in the right of way, you know, the 1-lane road, and separately we could put a bike path, a walking path, whatever you may have it, because you'd have a lot more room to do that. County Road Commission would be willing to listen to that. I think it's like a lot of things. It'd be up to them whether or not that ever gets approved, right? Their board, but that is one option. And then other options, you know, I think you look at Old 28th Street, you could do 100 things with Old 28th Street. I know they're not, the road commission isn't, they're not tied to Old 28th Street. They're, you know, if you want to make that a one-way, if you want to put on street parking, if you want to make it wide, make it more narrow, I think they're a lot more amenable to those changes. But there's really, when you look at the whole thing, it's kind of fun, not really Cascade Road. You're limited, but it's an interesting one. I think as an engineer, surprisingly, when I get projects, a lot of time, there's not many solutions. People pretty much know what they want, you know, we're going to rebuild this road and we're going to rebuild it the way it was. This one, so it's kind of fun because you kind of look at, you know, it is a really hard one to figure out. So I do emphasize that, you know, with you that, you know, you want to make it a safer road, but the county does really tie our hands doing that, and for good reason. Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think that, you know, obviously that we've been working on this for a while. And I do find that as a driver myself, if I'm going down a narrower pathway, I do tend to be more cautious, slow down, or at least I should go the speed limit or below it. One of the comments that you said was maybe taking a look at can't remember the word for it, the setback requirements.
Yeah, the building, yep.
And then having the road necessarily wouldn't get smaller, but it
feels smaller. And there's this, you can notice this more because the village area, right as you get across the bridge heading northwest, that has you have a bunch of trees on the side of the road, right? So it does feel a little tighter. And then you really notice this feeling as you go through 28th Street, through Burton, it really opens up. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is the more you can make it feel tighter, the more people tend to drive a little bit slower.
My question on that is, right now, if I remember right, I think it's a 20-foot setback requirement on each side. It's be 40-foot total on both sides from the road. So what would that look like? What steps would have to take place for us to amend those setback requirements? So at the very least, if there's new development taking place, or there's rehabs going on, or things like that, that it would incentivize the property owner to say, hey, you know, if you're expanding or whatever you're doing, now the setback is 10 foot, or, you know, whatever that number is. What does that process look like from?
It's a good question. I imagine it's planning commission.
I would think so. Well, that's, you know, it's,
Yeah.
well, I don't know that it's zoning, but it's certainly, what are these?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
It's, here we have our consultant to the implementation committee.
I'm sitting for that. So basically what that process typically entails, and the township has already started doing this as part of the implementation of the strategic plan, is by re-energizing that architectural review committee. And basically what their job is to have a boundary within that's designated on the zoning map to where if there's a development or redevelopment that occurs within this area, then their services as the subcommittee would essentially be triggered to work with developers or property owners to get the type of development that they want, or, you know, that is envisioned for the area. So typically that would be like, the zoning ordinance would spell out like what their roles and responsibilities would be, and what the requirements would be as far as like what the setback is, building type materials, roof pitches, you know, so on and so forth, number of parking spaces, things like that. So how that process typically starts is for township board appointing the architectural review committee. And then from that point, Brian, I believe, is working to amend or go through their bylaws and roles and responsibilities and things like that. They'll meet a few times and then kind of start talking about how we want to work on codifying
the type of development that the lower building will entail. So that'll be in partially a discussion with you guys, with what we started working on together. And then how do you translate what this building looks like into actual implementable language that then developers will have to follow. So then that goes through the planning commission process, through typical zoning ordinance amendment that gets approved by or recommended for approval by planning commission. Then it gets kicked to township board for the actual like adoption process. But we have to do several readings or something like that to get it like actually adopted into ordinance.
And then what comes out is when they want it to be paid for.
Correct. So then there's.
Understood.
So then
Not as easy as lifting benches.
We're not, no. So we're not gonna be able to do this all tonight.
So your goal particularly in all of that would be basically that carrot and stick, like we had talked about in the past of, well, hey, the DDA has, just throwing numbers hypothetically, a $20,000 facade improvement program that you can apply for to help spur those redevelopment processes. So you guys wouldn't necessarily be in the, we recommend approval for this zoning change, but you'd be a part of that discussion saying, we love the style of this building. Now, can you guys write the zoning standards that get us this building? And then you can offer financial incentives for people to build that building that you want.
So question for both of you. Are there, obviously, it's a long road to getting any of these, no pun intended, to get a lot of these things implemented. Are there anything that you can identify as a more short-term isolated project that the DDA might consider at a future meeting? And I'm thinking specifically of like the Hawk Crossing. Like, I know there's more than goes into it than, slapping the electronics out there to slow people down. But do you think that that is a project that can be considered by the DDA independent of the rest of this implementation work, or does it need to be folded in to the rest of that planning?
I think that what you guys are certainly well within your purview to do is you could start with the low hanging fruit of the vegetation, tree canopy, low profile plantings, things like that that are relatively cheap and seasonal, and you can do things like that, like budget for your next cycle and things like that to start kind of working toward that end goal.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. It's going to be hard to get any small changes.
Right.
But so Eric, if we did that, because that's kind of what I was thinking too, that those are things that are relatively easy to implement in a shorter period of time. And would we also be able to see whether they're actually inciting some change in driving behavior?
Yeah.
To help us understand then longer term, it's like, okay, this is working. So now maybe we can do some of these other things.
Right.
Yep, I can reach out to the road commission and we can schedule, volume and speed testing samples. So you can know different times a year. If you did different things, you can tell their differences.
In some communities, they have these, speed signs. You're driving, 55, 45, whatever. Would something like that purchased by the township or the DDA, would that help slow traffic down? Because, maybe 45, the average speed is probably 52 miles an hour,
Yep. So I talked to the road commission about those specifically, and they are receptive. They would, I believe they'd put one up at our cost. They only warn, and I would echo it as well, as they typically have a diminishing effect. So you put them up and people see them and they slow down, but then a week later, a month later, a year later.
That's true. Good point.
The secondary issue being you put one here, now everybody in the township wants one in their neighborhood.
Oh.
That's the secondary one.
Township own one?
I think we get it from the sheriff's.
Did we get it from the sheriff?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a mobile. The sheriff's department uses a mobile one, which
And
I
he's
like the
from- and
mobile
they
one.
were saying they don't,
Hmm?
how he, not really effective because people
It's the mobile one's nice because if you need to slow somebody, if you have road construction or if there's a good reason to slow it down for a week, it makes sense because it works for about a couple of times, somebody driving by it and then it doesn't work. Alternatively, you can go with like flashing pedestrians, like the pedestrian actuated crossing, county, well, you can in any other area typically, but counties against those, they don't want us to put those up because it's not the way it was explained to me. Like City of Grand Rapids loves them, but the City of Grand Rapids has an ordinance that you have to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. So it's very clearly spelled out. Now, the rest of the state, I would like to believe that's the case, but I think it gets a little more hairy. So the county doesn't like the pedestrian to think they have the right of way when they really kind of don't. They do, but so they won't let us put those up.
Unless we adopt an ordinance.
Now, like
yes.
Now, like the Hawk one, the big overhead flashing, it'll stop car. I think they'd listen to that one because that's it's red light, it stops cars. Problem being, it has to be warranted. To get it warranted, you're going to have a lot of pedestrians that need to use it. So if you can't demonstrate that it is necessary, they're not going to put one up.
All right.
Is it worth
well,
it talking, sorry, well, we're talking about walkability in the village. Is it worth it throwing out that one thing from the road commission about throwing up a river drive or not yet?
I mean, I mentioned it very briefly. It's turning it one way and putting pedestrian facilities in the right of way. I like the idea, but anytime you make a road two-way to one-way, it's always controversial.
Right. I was just going to say, I
It's-
can already hear the screaming.
It's exactly it. I think it's a good idea. Especially if you're going to renovate Tassel Park and make it the shining beacon of,
And it
the
wouldn't.
village area.
The Berger outlet would be still able to start after that and after Tassel Park.
And if you look at the DDA, I mean, you can get to it from a lot of different angles for pedestrians, but if you're over in Thornapple River, the Goodwood area that's getting the PFAS remediation right now, I mean, you got to walk all the way up Thornapple River and across 28th, and unless you take your life in your hands going down Thornapple River, but
Maybe the introduction of that idea for the people on Thornapple River Drive who've not been so forthcoming in giving and allowing the easement, maybe it would help them change their mind.
Maybe.
If we said that's the alternative to being able to, finish out the trail.
it's just a matter of how you view it. Some people might look at it and go, yeah, I want that on my street because it'll be slower, less traffic. But some people might say, no, it's a major inconvenience.
A long-term.
It's a big bite to take, but like I said, it solves a problem of connectivity and
Maybe it's a workshop.
Just a quick point of view, if our long-term goal is to calm traffic in that corridor, we've aligned to a step on the bridge to narrow the lanes and to make it more walkable. My recommendation would be if there are other low-hanging fruit options to calm traffic, making it feel more dense, to align those actions with when the bridge happens, that we make that corridor a little bit more dense feeling. Because I think if you do that, taking that into account and you roll that out around the same time, you're probably going to have a positive effect. You're getting closer to where you want to be.
Through that corridor from Thornapple River to Dr. Siegel's office there, we have the light posts. Would it be, we're talking about trees and canopies and whatnot. And a while back, we had talked about banners or whatever being put on the posts. Would that, to a certain degree, give the same effect if there were things, and maybe they're even flapping or whatever? It'd be
Very well
okay,
could.
what's going on? There's just a lot of movement happening, and I may need to slow down. And maybe much more cost effective too than digging up the concrete, planting some trees, waiting 20 years for them to create that canopy to slow that traffic down.
Yeah, I wouldn't promise anything, but yeah, that's the idea. I would think that you want your.
Take a position on banners, or is that something, no, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like, is that something that they might allow, or do we not know?
I think they would be fine with it. We have banners in other spots. Centennial Park has banners all the way throughout it.
put them up and then ask for forgiveness.
Not to the point.
To do flower baskets.
So I'm gonna put some time on a future agenda so that we can dig into some of this low hanging fruit in a little more detail. You know, and some of the things have short-term implementation. We've got money in the budget to make some moves sooner, but we will certainly want to accommodate some of the other ideas in next year's budget as well. Other questions for Eric while he's here? Yes.
I'm just wondering if, do you have some examples, visual examples, photos, whatever, of some areas that they've done this so that we can see what that looks like? You know, along streets and,
Yeah, I could come up with some.
that might be helpful for us to
Agreed.
have some visuals. Yeah.
Let's talk before next month's meeting.
Yeah, I can go ahead and get something put together.
And I like the idea of maybe some banners looking at that, and some that stick out far enough to kind of make it more close. Yeah.
Can we string lights across the road,
I don't think they'll let you do.
like in the Hallmark movies?
We'll add that to the list.
Yeah.
I get what you're going for though.
Right?
Because that is, you know, it's a canopy, it's a different type of
Town
canopy.
square.
And my take on it would be, if you want it to be more like a downtown road, you got to make it look more like a downtown,
Yeah.
right? You gotta,
Yeah,
Which we're headed.
it's not being so practical.
Yeah.
far away.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Good point.
And we've got,
Yeah,
it's starting to wobble, but we still have the big issue.
There's also, yeah, and there's also grants that the parks with the new, he's aware like of these three different types of grants, greenhouse emissions, all that kind of stuff that we didn't even know about before. So that's all kind of
All right,
part of it.
let's all refocus and move on to Article 9, which is a discussion of our transit options or lack thereof. So y'all have been receiving hopefully the emails I've been forwarding to you, and so Grace and I, along with Danielle and Chris, had a call with representatives from ITP, the Rapid, to discuss the recommendations that McKenna put together. The end of that call, we asked the Rapid to come back to us with alternatives, because they said basically, the recommendation in this memo isn't really something that'll be workable for us. We talked through some other ideas. Chris sent a follow-up email to them outlining the 4 points that we were hoping that they would come back to us with information on. And they basically came back to us very recently and said, yeah, none of these are really operationally possible for us. We can only give you this one option, which was essentially to adjust the timing of the stops during part of the day with the route remaining the same length and the cost for this fiscal year staying the same and the next year going up, and we would essentially be saving $25,000. So that's kind of where we are. And I don't know if anyone is on Zoom from ITP. No. Okay, didn't think so. We got the impression from the emails that the reps from the Rapid sent that they would not be participating in our meeting. And we were pretty disappointed, I think it's safe to say, with their response, because we really did make clear that we were hopeful to come back to the board with some alternatives to make this something that would be workable for us. And I don't think that we're quite there.
Yeah, I think that pretty much accurately sums up the discussion. So just as a quick recap, our recommendation was to eliminate Route 29, extend Route 28 from its current terminus at Woodland Mall to Cascade Meyer, and then perhaps invest any cost savings from there to look into more of that lived pass program. So after we met with the Rapid, this was on June 8th, some key questions that came out of that meeting were to be eliminating Route 29, extending all of Route 28 to Cascade Meyer. And what would that look like? Is that possible? Can we eliminate the number 29 and make the entire 529 interline Route 5? So this was something that was very interesting that otherwise we wouldn't have known had Chris not been sitting in his house and noticed it. But he said that he lives on bus route 5, and on bus route 5, it says on it, continues as bus route 29. So essentially somebody could ride one seat from Cascade all the way to downtown. And that's not known to the public at all. I mean, as you guys are the DDA and I'm getting looks like, what? And we had no idea either. So then we kind of got into the discussion of, okay, well, is there a way that you guys can advertise that a little bit more to the public, that you can essentially have a one seat nonstop shop? Well, there would be stops, but you know, from Cascade to downtown. Yeah, which was something that was a big deal that we had noted. And even through our public engagement process, that was something that was noted too of, well, I can't get downtown. Like everywhere else goes directly downtown, but Cascade doesn't. Well, turns out Route 5 turns into Route 29, which actually, in fact, does offer service to both areas.
You just have to know to stay on the bus.
Yeah, you just have to be sitting at Chris's house to know that that the
You
bus
have a
sign
lot of
changes.
time on your hands.
So the next question we had was, could we alternate routing within Cascade Township to better serve key businesses? So basically when the Rapid said, well, essentially what the problem is, and he used the rubber band analogy for this, which I think was a really effective way of understanding how they do their business and routes on the back end. So basically what they said was, if you think about their operations as a rubber band, they stretch it as far as you can. So that's why the route now, Route 29, goes all the way, you know, down to the end of the road there. However, when we said, can we just eliminate the rest of the stuff that people aren't really using and just stop at Meyer, what that leaves is a bunch of access on the rubber band for Route 29. So essentially what they said was, due to scheduling and due to everything else and how we have everything as kind of a well-oiled machine, that we would just have buses sitting there idling for, I believe, 14 minutes at a time. And that 14 minutes could, like, the township is getting charged for the DDA is getting charged for that either way. So you might as well take it to go to somewhere. So then we said, okay, great. But then do you think that we could reroute that to better service Target? So you could get, rather than getting dropped off at 28th Street, you can get dropped off closer to the store. Can we get better service to Costco? Can we get better services to all those businesses back there? So that was another question that we had for them after that meeting. And then reducing service hours to save the DDA money while still effectively serving core ridership. So basically taking a look at, can we reduce the frequency during certain days of the week, or basically where there's less ridership, and kind of try to figure out how we can work through it that way. So when we asked all these questions, like that was the key highlight of that discussion. A few days later, the Rapid came back to us and basically said, interlining routes 5, 27, and 29 during the weekdays would result in a reduction of 7 daily trips on Route 29 and reduce the frequency from 30 minutes to 60 minutes midday, which would then reduce the annual cost approximately $194,000, currently at $228,000, as Jennifer just alluded to. This would retain the existing Route 29 alignment, and that same route would have the same weekend service as it does now. So basically what that is saying, we'll give you less frequent service, less days a week, and save about $24,000.
And they didn't answer the rest of the questions.
Yeah. So then Chris
pushed back several times to say, so what about our questions?
So he emailed back, and basically said, thanks for the 4 sentences, but there's a couple other things that we wanted to know. So then at that point, Chris emailed them back and said, what is the estimated cost to eliminate Route 29 and extend all of Route 28 to Cascade Meyer? What options does the Rapid have to better publicize that Route 29 does in fact turn into Route 5 and offers service to downtown? Are there alternatives to improve service to key businesses, as I just alluded to, i.e. Target, Costco? Using that methodology of the rubber band, that, okay, well, if we're not going to stretch it all the way, then maybe we can use that extra time that otherwise would be idled to better service our DDA businesses. And given the revenue hour cost, what would be the total cost for the DDA keep the same services for another year? So basically in that contract, they note that would turn from currently, which is $79.37 per revenue hour, increased to $80.28 per revenue hour.
For the next fiscal year.
Yep. So they got back to us after that, which I saw came in on my phone a couple hours ago. But the gist that I got from their response to that was, this is what they told us was the only thing that they're able to offer us at this time. Now, I will also note that the Rapid is undergoing a large strategic planning process that is due to launch within the next year or so. So it's possible that they're thinking we don't want to invest a bunch of time and resources at this moment when we're already doing our big analysis in the next year or so. Possible, no one has said that, but that's just kind of where I'm thinking they might be coming from a little bit on this. But, you know, frankly, I think we were all pretty disappointed at the amount of time and work and research and data that we gave that stated a really excellent case that there's a huge cost for amount of ridership that just doesn't necessarily add up for the cost that you guys are paying right now. So basically the next steps from this would be to basically we have to the current contract expires in August. So the Rapid would need to have a response from the township or from you folks by that expiration, which they did note in the past that they wanted to have an answer at this meeting, but I think that that's not going to happen. And I think that, you know, we still have another month or so to kind of figure it out. And at this point, they already have the contract drawn up anyway, and it's reflective of saving that $24,000. So in the event that you guys would like to pursue that contract, it's already there. So just note that. So basically this is all to say, what would you guys like to do? Would you like to pursue the $24,000 savings? Would you like to just continue with what you've got? Or it is an option to just eliminate service altogether and explore other third-party options. So it's kind of like a little bit up in the air, and albeit pretty disappointing that we didn't really land on anything that we hoped.
Before we open for discussion, does McKenna have a recommendation? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
because this all just is.
I mean, not necessarily. So I think that you guys, at least from past conversations, and please correct me if I'm, projecting, but it seems like there is an agreed notion that providing service to at least Meyer is important, and having service provided to businesses that you guys support as the DDA is important. However, if saving $24,000 or $25,000, like, it's better than nothing. But do I think that there could have been more effort put on the other party of this conversation of, helping us kind of figure out better negotiating and listening more to what you guys wanted? Yes. So I guess my recommendation, if I, were to be in your shoes, I would almost consider taking, that's a tough one, actually.
Told you.
Yeah. And that's, I see the benefit in keeping service. I do. However, if it weren't to exist anymore, if it were ceased, do I think that the Rapid may find an alternative like they did for other non-millage communities? Very possible. But who's to say? You can't make that call.
But what I didn't realize in the CE, I'm seeing now these emails from the CEO of the Rapid, like the lack of flexibility. I didn't think of it this way, but those 6 cities that are part of the interurban transit partnership that are millage funded, I mean, they really have all the say. And then we're kind of the only, other than that, there was nothing that we could do from, if we weren't part of that six city partnership.
Yeah. It's sort of like being
There's
a
like
non-millage community. You're sort of at the mercy of what they tell you what you're going to do is sort of the impression that I got. where they were more like, wait a minute, this isn't a negotiation. This is you get what you get and that's it because you're non-millage. Granted that I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but that was sort of how I felt a little bit during that conversation. I don't know if you guys felt similarly to that.
Totally agree. It was almost insulting, not the conversation so much as the follow-up, the lack of engagement, the lack of response. I mean, and you all know, I've been one of the biggest proponents of the bus through all of this consistently, and I do see value in it. And it's my current opinion that our response should be, we cannot and do not agree to the options you presented. Unless you can give us another one, we're just going to let our contract terminate. And then put the onus back on them to, if they decide, ooh, maybe we do need to come up with something else, then they'll take the initiative to do that, because I just don't know that it's worthwhile to continue, given all the data that we've looked at. I'm struggling with moving forward with the modified plan that they've proposed. I'm curious to know what you guys also think.
I'll chime in just because I've been more on the pro side of the bus and providing transportation options to support the businesses of the DDA. But what I would say is I'm more moving towards that parallel path, taking what you said of, pushing back of you haven't given us a viable option. But I think on a parallel path, we need to remember we got about 6,000-7,000 rides per quarter going on. What is that parallel path to make sure that we are supporting those said individuals if we don't have an agreement and they don't provide any options? Because it looks like there won't be. And so if it is subsidizing Lyft and understanding in year one, we support up to the budget of 218,000 and graduate it down over time. But how do we ensure that we provide service and don't disrupt businesses? Because it's going to be a quick switch over.
It will be. And that really, I should have mentioned, has also made me feel more comfortable in my shift in mindset, because we can still accommodate the needs of the individuals who use the Rapid by providing this alternate mode of service. Now, I will say, if we do end up having to quickly deploy Lyft as a complete substitute, if ITP doesn't come back with something that's an actually viable plan, we'll need to get involved very quickly. And so I would want to perhaps engage McKenna to take care of, fleshing out what that would look like. I mean, Danielle, you've been working closely with them already. None of us are really in a place where we can do that negotiation. I would also want Township Council to weigh in to verify that we can spend our DDA dollars with Lyft, just in an overabundance of paranoia. Because, switching from giving money to ITP to a private entity, I just want to make sure that everything's above board. So I'm not in favor of telling the Rapid, no, we're not going to renew with you under any circumstances. I would be glad to sign an agreement with them if we come to something that's mutually acceptable, but I just don't know that we're there.
With Lyft, do we look at, okay, we can pick people up in certain locations and take them to Woodland Mall?
That is something that, yes.
Or from Woodland Mall to
Right.
the TDA location.
Yes, yeah, so that it's not as if, I need to go downtown Grand Rapids.
It is.
Yeah,
And
you have to be in
there's a variety of ways that can be accomplished too. And if you want to, briefly kind of summarize those.
Yeah, so from what I recall, my conversations with the representative at Lyft, it wouldn't necessarily be like, I know that they do have the concierge program, which operates as somewhat of a call center type of like third party that would filter in if somebody needs a ride, and then they would connect them to an available driver. However, Lyft at that time still cannot guarantee that somebody will be there when you need them at the location you need them to be. So to set up Woodland Mall as a sort of hub, unless if there was a township staff member or something, or DDA member that was like, go to, let me call the Lyft driver and call them to go to Woodland now and hang out for 2 hours to see if somebody will show up. Like, it wouldn't necessarily work that way. There would have to be a need on one end that ordered it, and then somebody would come.
But I think it controls fraudulent activity if you set
Yes.
very static points, like it's Woodland Mall where you have a bus transfer, you have covered areas for people to wait. It's just like a bus can run late. It's the nature of the beast of transportation. But how we create kind of these, origin points and final destination points and vice versa to control the flow and the expense is kind of where my head's at.
Other thoughts? I know we're tired, but.
I think you guys did a fantastic job, and I think you did it on the time frame that they asked. Agreed.
Thank you. It
But
was.
feels like it's like putting a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, and that was one thing that I felt like I was increasingly upset about was, all of the time that we put in, and you guys hired us to like help, and then it ended up just kind of not being what we wanted it to be.
But I think all that work, it is really helpful in order to make this change. Because all of the information is there to substantiate the decision and support the decision.
And
So it's really helpful.
And I would back that up where it's really important. We did have a meeting where within the top 10 of organizations that pay in the DDA were pro-bus, being Walmart being one of them who were at the meeting. And it allows to share the logic and the thought process of how we arrived at where we were at and where we're going. It wasn't just an off the cuff decision.
And your involvement was the genesis of this alternative, which we have not had in the past when we've had to consider this issue. I mean, we knew we needed to provide transportation, but the details of this Lyft program, none of us really had that. So don't think that you haven't provided value because you have.
Well, we appreciate that. I just didn't want you guys to feel like, well, thanks, I could have called the Rapid and they could have told me the same thing.
Control what you can control, and you can't control the Rapid.
If we go down the path of discontinuing the bus service, which I'm in favor of considering the situation, do we need to contact Meyer because they're by far the biggest, benefactor of the service, and let them know what is happening? So they're not reading about it in the newspaper or all of a sudden that one of
Sidelined anyway.
Really excellent idea.
Yeah, make a note right now.
Yeah, and I mean, Meyer, who knows how they'll react if we say, listen, this is the contract we received. We're not in a position to re-up this based on the information and the data that we received. Are you willing to reach out to ITP or to become more involved in this?
we need to give them a detailed explanation of what our position is.
Wanting to take that on? Okay.
I think just give them a copy of the report, and I think anyone else, from a business standpoint, cost benefit, it's a no-brainer.
But I think we should hand select a few organizations up and down the DDA. Meyer obviously being one of them.
Meyer,
Walmart.
The retirement home, they've provided some, I can't remember, called not Sentinel Point, the one in Centennial Park. Sunset.
But I also think like we need to think of in that, do we hire someone in absence of having a DDA director to run point on a number of these initiatives?
100%.
Or do we need to have a motion of someone who can be hired as the lead to do the implementation of lift and options and think through some things for us?
I would love to get a proposal from McKenna to see if they can help with some of these issues in the interim. If that's something that you think you guys have the bandwidth to put together, Danielle.
Absolutely.
Because there has to be a communication plan to riders. You just can't leave it to just the rapid and also to businesses. And then there's also the communication of signage and facilitating the program.
And I mean, I think it's safe to say that internal staff doesn't have the, the space to take on all of that at this point, right? I mean, Correct me if
I don't know.
I'm wrong, but I mean, I think that
Contacting businesses certainly, but I think, yeah,
getting the plan, I mean, getting the
Analysis.
program put together and
And
getting it
I
implemented.
think if we do discontinue also, having a thorough explanation on the Cascade website so that if Cascade Township gets phone calls, you can refer them to the website for a detailed explanation. So they don't have to be engaged in a conversation.
Well, and I think, and as I mentioned before, it's my inclination to reach out to ITP to say, listen, we did not approve the contract. We didn't vote that we don't want to have a relationship with you, but we can't approve the contracts that you
Yeah.
provided for us. If you've got something else you can propose, please do.
Yeah.
And then maybe they'll come back to us with something, maybe they won't, but I think concurrently, we absolutely need to move full steam ahead because we will certainly want to implement Lyft as a backstop, regardless, even if we want to have the rapid, give us an alternate plan, we're going to need to deploy the Lyft option as well.
And I think we also, it's the township to potentially look at the clientele who utilize the Go Bus. That's a stop and service as well. While I do feel that's outside of what the DDA does, that does impact a group of individuals in the township.
we have the Hope Network.
In knowing that that's again a communication,
Right.
and also, making sure that that's a viable option for them so that they will be impacted.
So that communication with the rapid, should that come from supervisor and?
Yep.
Okay.
You want to put together a draft or you want me to put together a draft and send it to you for live specking before you send it?
Let's see how the conversation flushes out and just send them what the decision was.
Do we need to make a motion on what we're going to be doing?
Sure.
I'm not necessarily saying we have to, I'm just.
Well, yeah.
It would be to reject the offer of what would
To
We're not gonna
decline
accept.
the proposed contracts. I move that the DDA decline accepting either of the contracts proposed by the Rapid and inviting them to propose an alternate arrangements should they have one.
And in the meantime.
Two separate.
Okay, two separate, okay.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor?
I
All right, I will also move that the DDA ask McKenna to put together a proposal to take on the planning of the Lyft deployment.
I second that.
And to contact businesses?
Well, I think that's
Another one?
stepwise.
Okay.
Other discussion? All in favor?
I
And I think that, after, to your point, we need to hear back, we need to get the response from the Rapid before we decide communications, but that's absolutely,
Yeah.
part of whether it's McKenna. or
Points well taken, yeah.
And you might want to include in the proposal, ongoing, I don't know, what even to call it, maintenance, communication, I don't know. Like, as part of the implementation cost, there's development of the program, right? There's providing the communication to the businesses and the riders about the program, but then there's also a separate communication about the change regarding the Rapid, should there be that change. So that seems to be kind of a different bucket. Steve?
So with all of this said and so forth, are we coming down to the point also that we're saying that I don't know, 194 or 218,000, we're committing to some kind of transportation for individuals that need to get within or outside the DDA?
I think that our budget is what our budget is for this year, but that's a conversation to have for the next year. I don't know that we need to make a determination about whether we want to budget a full 218 for 2024 at this meeting, but we should definitely.
That's got to be in that process or that thought process. It doesn't need to be decided now.
Agreed.
But what I'm hearing, and I'm all for stopping the bus based on the information that's been presented. what is it that we're also gonna be still committing to some kind of transportation?
Absolutely. I mean, my personal opinion is,
Yeah.
you know, whatever the market will bear, right? You know, if we need to spend the $200,000 on Lyft in order to get people where they're going, then my vote would be in favor of doing that. But I don't know that we yet know how that's going to shake out until we know for certain where the rapid is.
So, okay, because with that said, if, I don't want to say we're committed to that 200,000, but if we're thinking of committing to 200,000, what's the difference on just keeping the bus then?
I think it's
If we're
premature
gonna spend-
because that amount is based on what they charged us.
Right.
And when we look at what they charged us versus what we got as far as a benefit,
Yeah.
there's no way that's, so I think that that's not how to frame it because we're literally looking at what they, you know, their costs. But I think we have to, especially because we've got so much potential going on and I can go in, like, I don't think we should arbitrarily choose a number.
Room for.
I agree.
But we should at least prioritize
Yeah.
transportation and unique options that serve
Right.
businesses and consumers because there's something to be said for public transportation. I'm just hesitant to say 200 grand because I think it was an absolute.
I am not in favor of
Okay.
reducing our budget for this year.
Okay.
I am, maybe depending on
I think that we need
the
I
options.
think I'm barring any additional information, I would like to keep that number the same so that we can be sure that we're providing that coverage and that might be unpredictable. We don't know yet, you know, if everybody's going to jump on this, we might get increased.
And in the next 12 months, we're not going to spend what?
Right.
2 million.
I think that we will have a better idea of what we will spend in 2024 after we see how the implementation goes.
I agree, and I think we're saying we have a responsibility to transition this.
Yes.
We have a financial responsibility and a moral responsibility because this is a service we've provided and also to the objectives that we provide for the DDA. I think we need to revisit every year what we're doing with transportation as a line item in the budget as the world continues to evolve around us. And we're going to learn, I think what everyone's saying about Lyft, of what that engagement looks like in that cost structure.
Much more eloquently put, but that was the point that I was trying to.
So when is the budget year? When you're talking about, what is it, the calendar? year?
For the township and for the DDA, it's calendar year.
Okay.
The Rapid, their fiscal year
Yeah.
ends in
In August or whatever.
Yeah,
Yes.
October,
Yeah.
Okay.
October to September.
Yeah.
So it's,
I just wanted,
Yeah.
when you're talking about continuing, just what the budget year is.
we did vote on that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Other discussion, I'm assuming that Grace, you'll send the email, okay?
Just one comment that I just did in the negotiation process. I think that the other party has to know that we're committed to terminating the service. If there's not a good, they have to understand that the please and thank yous are going away because we're committed.
That's yes.
I just don't think that 200,000 is a big number for them. Frankly, and they're
We're
to
small.
them, we're as good as gone anyway. So I don't think we're gonna see any engagement from them.
I think that's right, Rishi, and I think that they probably
Yeah.
figured it wasn't worth it. With us to, you know, continue to
All the work that they had to
negotiate,
figure out for
right,
rearranging everything.
right. I think that they probably thought, forget it, we're just gonna. we'll
But
throw
it's a
this-
huge amount for a local township DDA. I mean, it's just all
I agree with that,
perspective.
but to them, we're not one of the core municipalities, we're not, you know, it's not worth their.
They were doing us a
Yes.
favor by
Yes.
figuring out a route to come out here.
Yes, and I'm still hopeful that they'll come back to us with after having given it some deeper thought with a proposal that's more acceptable to us. And if they do, we may need to schedule a special meeting if we need to, you know, have that conversation.
I mean, that conflict last year when it was more intense and I was kind of the raining on the parade, the conflict that they refused to waive was that our law firm had helped handle some part of the Laker line and the bench or the installations of several of the benches we're funding. And just to refuse to waive that conflict so that our law firm could look at this review of the contract. I mean, that was, it's got to be mutual. I mean, it's a lot of money. It's just frustrating.
All right. So hopefully we'll get some response, but if not, we have a plan. All right, unless there's further conversation on that.
Nope, thank you guys.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you for your hard work.
Oh,
Yeah,
Thank you.
anytime.
I did speak to someone from another neighboring township. I think it's the only other one that's got some kind of fees similar to ours, except it's the township, not the DDA, wondering,
Trying to poach you.
oh, no, just trying to ask for the like what we did.
Oh, what we looked
Process
into.
wise, so I
and-
said we
Yeah,
hired a
well,
private
maybe
firm and gave them your name.
catching on regionally, which then maybe they can turn back and say, oh, maybe we should be more flexible.
Right,
But anyway, I'll probably stick around for the brief updates.
sure thing. And we're gonna sift through these brief updates because it's after 8 o'clock, friends. Article 10, Developer Day.
Right. And you guys can ask as many questions as you want. We go into the details in the future. June 7th, the Right Place, I don't know if you guys had worked with them before at the DD level, but that nonprofit economic nonprofit for West Michigan hosted developer days where they meet with, they choose 3 different municipalities. I think they did 4 this year. They asked if we would participate and I said, yes. We hosted a big bus load in the morning, a big bus load in the afternoon. It was actually super helpful. Danielle, was on the entire day as well as our planning director, just to get a feel for, and we had to choose 3 sites, kind of did 4 redevelopment, what the priorities are. And I guess Cascade Township had been, I don't know, we were the number 3 desirable community for people to see what's going on for developers to hear about. So it really helped flesh it out a lot as far as like, they're always outside of develop. We're known as like a higher end residential community. We're in the fortunate position that we can be kind of picky in what we'd allow, and the developers are always going to have that pressure. But it was really helpful, and we ended up then meeting with the owners of the Thornapple Plaza. We met with them last week, and they were super excited. Yeah, it was huge. We just hadn't gotten around to it, but they were there, and they're very excited to partner to take advantage of our carrots if we
That's
when we
great.
have them. So they were a newer ownership group the last couple of years. And so they were trying to do some renovations, but based on their budget, but they were really excited to work with us. They weren't able to come tonight.
so this developer group, these are business developers or these are residential?
No, these are the owners of the Fowling.
No, I apologize. This group that came in that had
Both.
buses, was it both residential and commercial developers? Okay.
And, yes, both. And then the bankers, it's a whole big networking event. So, but I thought it was really helpful to flush. I mean, what our priorities are, what are realistic expectations. I thought it was really helpful. Oh, we showed them Old 28th Street. Yeah, they were all local. It was also like a big networking event for part of the financing, banks, that kind of stuff. But we stopped at Old 28th Street to talk about, multi-story mixed use, more villagey type feel. And then the owner of the karate, it used to be a dry cleaning, and it's also, there's 2 car places, and the one, it was right next to the karate place. Should know. He's open to selling at some point, perhaps, and had always thought of it like that type of village feel. So I thought it was really good.
It was, yeah. I felt like if anything that was a huge win out of that day, I thought was making those connections with the folks that own the Thornapple Plaza area, which we found that they own all of it and they also function as landlords as well. So it's not going to be like 20 different people that we have to track down. And
That's very good.
and all of that.
So there's only one owner now.
Well, it's a partnership. I think there's multiple people in it.
Yeah.
And then they knew the gas station too. Like they knew
Yeah, they did.
that was very, that seemed to be really open to, looking less like a gas,
This
right?
is
Some kind of partnership.
Spartan Nash owns the gas station, don't they?
That's what we thought. No, it's,
So Spartan Nash is just
leases it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I can't remember who it was.
I can't either, but they'll know. So that was exciting and, huge as far as redevelopment and village center.
Yeah, and density was a big discussion that was had. A lot of the residential developer folks were like, 9 stories or
this isn't penciling out for us, but we actually had a good case study, like on Old 28th Street. If you go up the hill a little bit, I forget what that side street is called, but there are several little one-story condos there. And one of them had just recently sold for over 650,000. So they were like, listen, there's a real life case study here that you can have this medium density and still make quite a bit of money on it, because there's a market for that in Cascade. And older, folks that their children are all in college and they're looking to downsize and be snowbirds. That's the dream, right?
Yeah,
So
just gotta get him move out first.
yeah, very successful. And I was happy and excited to be invited.
Wonderful. That's exciting. And let's keep them all in the loop, right? As part of
And then the architectural review committee can be on the next trustee meeting. There is a board member who wants to be on that for the at large, so.
Planting project update. We heard a little bit about that before. So things are planted and being watered, right? Metro Cruise update, and stop me if I'm moving too quickly.
What happened with the planters?
They were planted.
But what happened with watering? The irrigation wasn't turned
I
on?
think they were just planted a month too late, not quite sure why. But I think
There was a delay. I mean, and I'm gathering this from,
So the contract, yeah, so the decision was not, it took a while to get.
it was a delayed decision, but I think it
Yes.
was delayed deployment as well. They didn't get the plantings in as quickly as we had hoped.
Okay.
But it's hard to be critical because we also delayed and,
Well,
but,
yeah.
we'll see. I'm
Okay,
kind of refraining judgment until we kind of see how it goes. And now that we've got a Parks Director who's paying
right.
attention to this, we'll rely on her
Okay.
for updates on that
Great.
as well. Metro Cruise update. I don't have much of an update. There was a little bit of a discussion about whether or not the Metro Cruise warm-up would be able to use the name Metro Cruise.
Yeah.
We had a meeting. I participated in a meeting with the committee and with the event planner, and everything is going to go ahead as planned for this year as has passed. Things might change going forward, but for this year it's status quo. Strategic plan implementation update. Shelley, got anything?
We have not met we didn't have the last two meetings, so there really is no update.
Right. Joint meeting update. So I did send an email, and I might have copied everybody on that email, asking to schedule a joint meeting, and the response was generally that we should wait until some of the staff positions are filled. So that is where we are with that. Update regarding replacement of the DDA Economic Development Director. Is there an update?
there may be potential one really good candidate, but I think overall we need to find the manager first, and we have an interim manager starting tomorrow, and then we had we had 30 plus applications come in, and we had several that really stood out with management experience, like that were just really good potential candidates. So we hope to make that decision. 4th of July might slow it up a little bit, but soon, because we need some. A retired manager out of Ohio who just does it as to keep his foot in the door. So, what else? And then in the meantime, we have a full-time communications director that started. We were paying $80,000 a year to an outside firm for 2 full days a week. For $60,000, we're getting a full-time 5 days a week employee. So that should help a ton, especially because a huge part of the description of this economic development director was communications.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yep. And then we've got different people. We've got an assistant who does event planning, and then also the right place is talked about from an economic development perspective. So it's a little tricky because we need a manager before we, yeah.
So I'll keep putting it on the agenda, not to be pesky. But
No, it's good. I won't forget, but I appreciate you keeping it on.
Update regarding scheduling an informational meeting. We need to have it. There were some staff illnesses and whatnot, and we had originally kind of talked about doing it at this meeting. We're going to do it in July. So there are some statutory notices that have to go out a certain amount of time in advance of the informational meeting. So we'll work and make sure that that's done And, typically no one attends those, but there's a little bit of a presentation. You've all sat through it, before, so. Expect that next month, and we usually just do it after our regular meeting, and it's taken an average of 5 minutes. Update regarding Cascade Road Bridge pedestrian facilities. Is there even an update?
Maybe you guys will, but we've got time to decide. So the pathway committee was, didn't like there were some parts of it that they really didn't like if you're biking, but then at the same time, you gotta have a barrier. It's just, so they're trying to squeeze a little bit more room if they can.
Okay.
It might not look as nice, but we can go into details next time. Nothing's gonna be decided.
Okay. I'll put that on the agenda for next time as well.
Maybe it won't look like like you're crossing an over expressway in Flint, but it might, I don't know. We can decide that together as a group. Anyways, just working it out. We've got time.
Okay, that's good to know. Article 11, any other business? I've included the minutes from the last couple meetings and our budget. I would note that when I looked through the budget, when it was attached, I said, oh no, there's a red line item. And you should note that this is a little bit of a different financial report than we've seen in the past. In that this is showing kind of month to date. We still have a fund balance, so we are not in the red as a DDA. I just wanted to make that clarification if someone took a quick look and is frightened by red on a balance sheet like I am. Any other business or items to discuss? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thanks very much. This was a long meeting, but.
Thank you.